July 21st, 2026. We are at the Cape Canaveral City Council workshop meeting located at the City Hall Council Chambers, 100 Polk Avenue in Cape Canaveral, Florida. I call this meeting to order. And with that, Councilmember Willis, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I think my volume might be up a little bit.
That end, Michael? Oh, yeah.
It's, yeah. Okay, sorry. We will cease and desist. I have volume. Yeah, I think the what do they call it? Not the volume, but there's another word for it. A technical word, radio. The pot is too high.
Mayor Pro Tem Jackson. Here. Councilmember King.
Here.
Mayor Morrison.
Here.
Councilmember Shoriak.
Here.
And Councilmember Willis.
Here.
Like the record show, the whole council is here. Council, thank you for being here, and our city staff and members of the community. This is a workshop meeting, and we have it slated. We have a regular city council meeting at 6 p.m. tonight, and so we're going to try to work through it. And just want to say again, thank you all for being a part of this. It's a process we do every year, and we allocated a little bit more time this year so that we can dig in. The agenda is in front of us. If you'd like a copy, there should be some out in the foyer when you come in. We are on to item number 4, which is a discussion, 4.1. I'd like to hand it over to our city manager, Keith Touchberry.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I did receive information from our city attorney. He will be here. He's just caught in traffic, just so you know. So he'll be here. And good afternoon, staff members, Cape Canaveral residents, and to those who are here, and to those who are also watching online or will watch online later. We have a couple of items on our agenda today, the first being 4.1, City Manager's opening statement. And after the statement that I make, Council, I'll go ahead and make a brief announcement as well. So good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council, and members of our community. Today marks the beginning of one of the most important responsibilities entrusted to this Council, the development and adoption of the city's budget for fiscal year 2026-2027. The budget is more than a financial document. It is a reflection of our priorities, our values, and our commitment to responsible stewardship of the public's trust and the resources entrusted us. Before we begin discussing specific budget proposals, I believe it is important that we first establish a clear and honest understanding of the city's current financial condition and how we arrived at this point. The challenges before us did not emerge during a single budget cycle, nor can they be resolved within one. They are the result of financial practices and policy decisions that developed over many years. For approximately the past 15 years, annual budgets in which projected expenditures exceeded projected recurring revenues were subsequently approved. And during that period, the city routinely relied upon a term known as cash forward from the prior fiscal year as a funding source to balance the budget. While the use of cash forward is permissible as a budgetary financing mechanism, it is not a recurring source of revenue and does not resolve a structural imbalance between ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures. Continued reliance on cash forward to support recurring operating costs contributed to the steady depletion of the city's unassigned fund balance. Moreover, the presentation of cash forward within the budget process had the effect of obscuring the extent to which the city was relying on accumulated reserves to finance current operations, making it more difficult to recognize the true trajectory of the city's financial condition. These practices contributed to the city receiving 2 consecutive unfavorable annual audit results, this current fiscal year and the one prior. The 2 previous years, pardon me. The audits reflected concerns regarding the city's declining financial position, including the continued erosion of reserves and the absence of sufficient financial capacity to withstand future economic or operational challenges. Although these conditions developed over multiple budget cycles, clear and comprehensive recommendations to reverse those trends, including reducing reliance on fund balance, restoring reserves, eliminating recurring structural deficits, and identifying sustainable recurring revenue sources, were not clearly presented to the council as part of the annual budget process. As a result, the structural issues persisted, the city's financial position continued to weaken, and the difficult decisions now before this council became significantly more challenging. In addition to these long-standing structural issues, the city did not comply with its own code in 2025. When the unassigned fund balance fell below the minimum level of 17% of general fund operating expenditures, the council was not formally notified as required by code, nor was a recovery plan presented to restore the fund balance within the required time frame. Those actions are required by our own financial policies and did not occur. Today, the city has no meaningful reserve funds available. That means we have little financial capacity to absorb the impacts of a hurricane, a significant economic downturn, unexpected infrastructure failures, dare say public emergencies, or other unforeseen events without reducing services, increasing revenues, or both. The financial condition before us is further reflected in our audit history. The city has received 2 consecutive unfavorable annual audit ratings and is now entering a 3rd audit cycle while facing significant fiscal challenges. A 3rd consecutive unfavorable rating could result in increased oversight by the state of Florida, and I should say will result in increased oversight, reducing local flexibility and requiring greater external monitoring of the city's financial affairs. Against this backdrop, the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 budget cycle projects expenditures that exceed anticipated revenues by approximately $4 million. This is not simply a budget gap for one fiscal year. It is evidence of a structural imbalance that must now be addressed directly. Adding to this uncertainty is the potential impact of Amendment 3, which is expected to appear on Florida's November 2026 general election ballot. If approved by the voters, the amendment could significantly affect the city's future ad valorem tax base by expanding property tax exemptions and further limiting the growth of taxable value. Because ad valorem taxes constitute the city's primary recurring source of operating revenue, any reduction in taxable value or future tax collection would further constrain the city's ability to fund essential municipal services, rebuild reserves, and restore long-term financial stability. While the ultimate impact cannot be quantified until the amendment is decided and implementing legislation is adopted, prudence requires that we acknowledge this uncertainty and incorporate it in our long-term financial planning. This potential change further underscores the urgency of diversifying the city's recurring revenue sources, reducing our dependence on a single primary revenue stream, and strengthening our financial resilience before additional fiscal constraints are imposed. Accordingly, this council faces several significant responsibilities during this budget process. We must correct the city's existing code violation by adopting a formal recovery plan to restore the unassigned fund balance, rebuild financial reserves, and return the city to compliance with its own financial policies. Financial reserves are not simply an accounting metric. They are the foundation of fiscal stability, organizational resilience, and public confidence. We must adopt a fiscally responsible budget that begins aligning recurring expenditures with recurring revenues and starts the process of eliminating the city's structural deficit. Finally, we must recognize that the city's historic dependence on ad valorem taxes has left us financially vulnerable. While property taxes will continue to serve as a critical component of our revenue structure, they cannot be expected to bear the ever-increasing share of the cost of providing municipal services. For many years, comparatively little concentrated effort was devoted to developing new recurring revenue streams that could diversify the city's financial base and lessen the burden on property taxpayers. That must become a priority moving forward. This administration will be bringing forward recommendations to explore lawful, responsible, and sustainable revenue opportunities while continuing to prudently manage the traditional revenue sources upon which the city currently depends. At the same time, financial recovery cannot be achieved through additional revenue alone. It will also require disciplined spending, careful prioritization of essential services, operational efficiencies, and a commitment to ensuring that recurring expenditures are supported by recurring revenues. These conversations will not always be easy. Some of the decisions before this council may be difficult, and some may be popular. However, postponing difficult decisions only limits future options and increases the burden on future councils, future employees, and future taxpayers. We have reached a point where action is no longer optional. It is essential. Our responsibility extends beyond balancing a budget for the coming fiscal year. Our responsibility is to restore the city's financial integrity, comply with our own ordinances, rebuild public trust, protect the taxpayer's investment, preserve local control, and ensure that future generations inherit a financially stable and resilient municipal government. My commitment and the commitment of this administration is to provide complete transparency through this process. You will receive accurate financial information, realistic projections, objective analysis, and recommendations grounded in sound financial management principles and the long-term interests of this community. My responsibility is not to recommend the easiest course of action, but the one that best positions this city for long-term financial success. The decisions we make during these budget workshops will shape the city's financial future for many years to come. Although the challenges before us are significant, they are not insurmountable. By acknowledging the realities of our financial condition, making informed and sometimes difficult decisions, and remaining committed to fiscal discipline and accountability, I am confident that we can restore this city's financial health, rebuild its reserves, strengthen public confidence, and leave this organization stronger and more resilient than we found it. Now, I look forward to working collaboratively with the council and our community throughout this budget process, and so does our staff. And before I make an announcement, I do want to reflect on the statement that I just read, and for the community in particular. This council has agreed to meet today at 1 o'clock. Thank you for devoting extra time today to get into what is the first of what will likely be several budget workshops. And that's important for the community to understand, because we know we have a public comment period coming up. And I think the community who wants to speak should understand that we're just getting started publicly and that we have many workshops to go. There will be many things to discuss between now and then. And I don't anticipate this council making any huge decisions during this potentially 4-hour period. They know I told them I think they should stop at 5 because they got to be back at 6. So that's a hard stop, Mayor, if you will. Secondly, we have several items on the agenda this evening to deal with some things that I just referenced in this statement. The council is required to, by law, adopt a millage rate, a tentative millage rate today. However, they have some housekeeping to deal with on an ordinance that we must clarify first before the council can proceed with establishing a tentative millage rate. And if you plan on attending that meeting this evening, then you will see that conversation take place. And so those decisions will be made later. Now I'd like to make a statement an announcement into the record. Before we proceed with this budget presentation, I want to inform the community of an important matter concerning the city's commitment to transparency and accountability. As I discussed, significant concerns have been identified regarding the historical management of the city's finances and the financial practices that contributed to our current fiscal condition. To ensure those concerns are reviewed objectively and independently, the city has requested the Brevard County Sheriff's Office conduct an investigation into the overall management of the city's finances. The purpose of this investigation is to determine the facts and to evaluate whether any criminal conduct, employee misconduct, policy violations, failures of internal controls, or organizational deficiencies occurred. This is a fact-finding investigation. It is not intended to target any individual, and no conclusions have been reached. Because the investigation is active, the city will not comment on its details or speculate regarding its outcome. We will fully cooperate with investigators, remain committed to transparency to the extent permitted by law, and will take whatever corrective actions are appropriate based on the facts established. Our responsibility is to ensure accountability, protect the public's trust, and restore confidence in the management of this organization. We owe nothing less to our residents, taxpayers, employees, and to this council. Thank you, council. That concludes my statement and announcement. And whenever you are ready to proceed, we can go into item 4.2. I will come down to the podium for that.
Thank you very much. I think the following along the agenda makes sense. At 4.2, we have our presentation, the budget past and present in council. Before proceeding, I wanted to see, we're going to, as the city manager said, listen and learn quite a bit today, absorb as much information from our city staff, then give the public a chance to speak. I agree, and I don't think anyone would disagree. This is the beginning of several workshops, and my comments to our city manager and administration on what we just heard is thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. Council, any comments or questions before we proceed?
I'm appreciative of the lead that our city manager has taken on this, so thank you. We appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. City manager?
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
I'll work over here.
I have one here.
Apparently yours is a little loud.
Yeah, a little.
Is it on? Yeah. Okay, the light must not be working then. If you can turn to the first PowerPoint. I don't know who's controlling it either. Okay, ask the clerk. Thank you. So as they prepare the PowerPoint presentation, and just to make the community aware, prior to any council meeting, whether it's a budget workshop or a regular scheduled meeting, council members meet one-on-one with the city manager's office to go over the budget. And we did a similar one-on-one meeting in compliance with sunshine laws to go over the information that we're going to share here. I will tell the council that there is additional information in this presentation, so while you've heard some of it, there are new things to go over on that presentation. And then secondly, when we get into the conversation about fund balance restoration options for this council, we have a separate PowerPoint for that, and Joey Blacker will take the lead on presenting that for the council.
While we're getting set up here, City Manager, the printout that's provided ahead of our budget titled Cape Canaveral Financial History, is that consistent with what we're going to display?
I'm not sure what handout you received. It doesn't look thick enough to me. I think that might be some slides that were revised as we briefed each one of you one-on-one. There were some modifications to the presentation, and so all of you got what was changed in that regard.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
but I can't say for sure without looking at it. So do I have control now, or can you go full screen?
I assume we know that our monitors are all off as well. And if,
Okay.
yes. Okay, yeah, I assumed it was.
So if you can put the presentation to full screen, we'll be good to go. Thank you for your patience, council and community. Is this the right presentation, Joey?
That slide is, I believe, the same one we have.
You may,
just letting you-
that may be what you have, but that is not the right presentation.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We can get backup documents to you
No, that's,
as part of the minutes for this meeting. If I had a tie on, I'd be loosening it about right now, right? Roll up some sleeves. Let's get started. I could throw some stand-up at you, but got to be appropriate for public meetings.
drop one button, that Miami Vice look,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be requiring no collar on that. Yeah. Crockett and Tubbs. There's some people in the audience that don't even know who Crockett and Tubbs were, though. So my finance director probably. Okay, here we go. So it looks like I have control. This is just an orientation slide in the beginning to talk about, for the community's sake, we'll talk about our financial history timeline over the last 2 years. We'll talk about some city code requirements that we need to meet. We'll talk about the next fiscal year budget, and we'll summarize. As I said in my opening statement, this is a 15-year history of our revenues and our expenses. And if you look very closely, blue represents revenues and orange represents expenses. And these budgets were adopted over time, as I referenced in my initial statement. This is to just give you a broad overview of our current personnel situation, so you see where everyone is employed, and the total numbers at the bottom of each column represent the number of employees during that fiscal year. And you can see how each department changed over time from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 26. And this again is relevant to our overall budget process during those years. So another historical slide to just kind of superimpose some information. You can see that the red dotted line across the middle is what our minimum fund balance reserves were supposed to be by ordinance. At 20% historically, until last year the city adopted a lower rate at 16.7%. That's why that red line dips down to the right. The blue number represents our unassigned reserves, and you can see over history the pattern in which the reserves slowly came downward. This was our millage rate during those times. It just kind of superimposing it on that chart here. You can see it in relation to the overall picture, revenues going down, millage rate going down, until ultimately we are where we are fiscal year 26. This is an important 2-year timeline. I know the council has seen this, but for the community's perspective, this is an important timeline for us here and with staff. And when the city adopted its budget, its fiscal year 25 budget, right, in September of 24, council was informed that we had 20.1% in unassigned reserves. The auditors came in, as they always do, around November, and they go through our books, and then they deliver a report to the council. And in that report, verbally, and we'll just say that 8.4% was the reality of what our unassigned fund balance was. And as I said in my opening statement, that number was not made very clear to this council. And this is significant time in our financial history that we'll explain in a little bit. We proceed with our budget process last year. All the while, we were told that we needed to reduce our expenses and increase our revenues. And last year, as we know, we did decrease some expenses, but we also decreased our ad valorem revenues, and we really didn't do anything to increase other revenue streams. We initiated paid parking conversations. They didn't come to fruition until about a month or two ago. And those conversations have been put on pause and will resume during this budget cycle at some point as council wants to take that up. So we go into the audit then for our current, for the fiscal 25 budget, and the auditors give their report in March, and they tell us that no, we don't have 16.9% in unassigned reserves, we have 0. And that was the red flag for all of us last March. And we set upon a course of action to determine why is it that we have 0 money in our savings account. So to show a different picture of the budgets at that time, when we were really at 8.4% of in our reserves, when we said we were 20.1, we had budgeted that year expenses 21.9, and we had projected revenue at 17.9. So that's a structural deficit, and we relied on our unassigned fund balance to make up that difference. And then we entered the next fiscal year with the same posture, budgeting 23 in expenses where we're only bringing in 17.8 after ad valorem, after the millage rate was adopted. A structural deficit of about 5 million, approximately. 6 million, roughly 5 million. So going back to that timeline that we just showed, some things should have happened, and this is what I mentioned in my opening statement. We have a code 2-210, which we can explain at great length during our fund restoration conversation. But briefly now, our code says that we must have, after an annual audit, we must, and prior committed or unassigned fund balance causes the unassigned fund balance to fall below 17% of general fund operating expenditures. The city manager will so advise city council in order for the necessary action to be taken to restore the unassigned fund balance to 20% of general fund operating expenditures. This is separate and independent from the 16.7% that we mentioned briefly a moment ago. I've already said it. No notification was made to the council that we got below 17%, and no fund restoration plan was initiated back in February. No fund restoration plan was mentioned to me when I was hired in August. And we are today 17 months into a 2-year, what should be a 2-year fund restoration window. 17 months into that. So that's what the red line is, pointing down to the February 2025. And as you know, we entered into our fiscal year at the deficit. So this explains what happened. We did not trigger, that ordinance was not triggered as it should have been. Council was not presented with that discrepancy. Council was not presented with a fund balance restoration plan to be accomplished in 2 years. We moved forward in our budget adoption process to the current fiscal year where we projected 4.5 million, which is what we had, and we budgeted 5.2 million. Come March, bottom line, when we realized this, we had to put the brakes on all spending. We had to freeze all positions. We had to not hire folks. We had to basically not spend about $700,000, or not only would the ship be run into ground further, but we would not be able to pay our bills at the end of the fiscal year. So we put a freeze on all spending. So continuing on with this graphic, these are the actions that your staff has taken within the past 4 months. In March, we recognized that discrepancy. We took immediate steps to not spend $700,000, and to date, we've managed to not spend $1.5 million. We have 2 months left in the fiscal year, and we're going to continue to try to not spend additional revenue. The city is now in the process of preparing the next budget, and we projected at the beginning of the budget cycle here, we projected a $5 million structural deficit if council did not elevate ad valorem taxes and if we did not bring any alternative revenue streams, again, taxes just being one form of revenue. So we projected if no additional revenue streams, we would enter into this fiscal year with a $5 million in the hole. We are now July of 26. So this slide talks a little bit about what has to happen this evening. The council is going to have to address Ordinance 2-210, where we've dipped below 17% of general fund operating expenditures. And we are well into the 2-year cycle where we should be in a fund restoration plan. We're not in a fund restoration plan. And so when we get to the meeting later this evening, the council cannot address the millage rate until it addresses this ordinance and how you want to proceed with this ordinance. I'll say it now, we could say it again later. Should you choose to proceed with complying with the ordinance, then you will have to pass a budget that will restore our unassigned fund balance by about $3.3 million, in addition to dealing with the $4 million deficit. If you do not amend the ordinance in some fashion, and that might not be the right word, we can talk with the attorney, but these are ordinances passed by council, and council can certainly address them as they need to handle the business of operating the city. That's why it is an agenda item this evening. So this is the challenge that lays before you regarding that. This is just a brief summary slide where general fund reserve requirement is at 16.7%, but the unassigned fund balance recovery goal is 20%. Well, we will explain those in greater depth when we get to our fund restoration presentation. And of course, the triggering percentage was at 17. I wanted to go a little bit into what is cash forward, because that figured prominently in my opening statement and how we arrived at our situation today. And this is, I know council is familiar with what cash forward is, but I think the community should understand. Cash forward refers to the available cash and fund balance from the prior fiscal year that is appropriated to help finance the next year's budget. It is not current year revenue. So council may remember monthly when you get your financial reports in your packet for each council meeting, it says the very first thing is revenue. And the very first item listed on those reports under revenue was cash forward. And for the public's understanding, cash forward is not a revenue stream. I like to think of it as a mechanism. It's unassigned revenue, it's savings. And it's money that you deem assignable because you need to balance your budget at the end of the fiscal year. So if you budget to spend $20 million If you project you're going to bring in $8 million and you're going to spend $10 million, then you need to cash forward $2 million, or you need to take out a loan. It's that simple. You borrow from savings, or you figure out some other way to pay down your projected expenses. And for 15 years, we took from savings in the form of cash forward. It is not current year revenue. It's the use of accumulated financial resources that already exist. At some point in time, the city put it in the bank, in previous years. It got put in the bank and it was held there. Mischaracterizing cash forward as reoccurring revenue can create the illusion of a structurally balanced budget, when in reality the municipality is spending more each year than it collects. This is the picture that councils were painted each fiscal year for the past at least 15 years. What has cash forward continued? Well, the Government Finance Association, GFOA, give us recommendations, and they recognize that appropriating fund balance is a legitimate budgeting tool. It's not like we violated the law. We can do it, but only under limited circumstances. And it should be done with council's knowledge. There should be an ordinance in place that directs that to be known to council, regardless of what the overall fund balance is. We clearly state to council during the fiscal budget process that if you approve this budget, we're taking figure X out of our reserves and we're using it as cash forward, so you know what's happening in that fund balance. It never happened. Cash forward should primarily fund one-time expenditures, and these are just some recommendations: major maintenance, one-time projects, emergency repairs, disaster recovery, equipment replacement, capital purchases. As an example, we not use cash forward to support recurring operating expenses. And there's some examples there. The GFOA, whose recommendations that everyone strives to, adhere to, follow. They're not laws, but they're very, they're strong recommendations. They discourage balancing annual operating budgets by routinely using fund balance to pay for these items: salaries, benefits, operating costs, utilities, and so forth. Doing so creates a structural balance, a structural budget imbalance. And they also recommend, the GFOA that is, that the general purpose governments, meaning us, cities, have at least 2 months, approximately 16.7% of regular general fund operating revenues or expenses in unrestricted fund balance as a minimum level for fiscal stability. So we need that money. It's not just cash laying around. It's money that we just try not to pretend exists in case we need it. So to maintain adequate unrestricted fund balance, just a little busy slide here, but many Florida municipalities adopt reserve policies that are more conservative, commonly 20 to 25%. Those are conversations for the council later. For hurricane risk, all of these things that we've already talked about is why we need that money in the bank. And we want to use it strategically for those other things we just talked about: economic downturns, etc. And to distinguish reoccurring from non-reoccurring resources, just as a final point to this portion of the presentation, one of GFOA's strongest budgeting principles is that recurring expenditures should be supported by recurring revenues. Recurring revenues include property taxes, utility charges, finance fees, state revenue sharing, local option taxes. Those all exist here. We would like to add to that list so that we can create alternative revenue streams and not overly burden our taxpayers through ad valorem taxes. City of Cape Canaveral needs alternative revenue streams. Just a little more about distinguishing one from the other. Non-recurring resources include cash forward, asset sales, settlement proceeds, one-time grants, using non-recurring resources to finance those recurring expenditures. They postpone difficult fiscal decisions. So it's great. Let's get grants. Let's get appropriations. Let's do what we can to bring in some money to fund projects and so forth, but they are not recurring. We can't rely on those sources. The pattern that the city's engaged in is precisely the type of structural imbalance that GFOA cautions against. Now, while we can legally adopt a balanced budget, which these councils did, adopted balanced budgets, while simultaneously weakening its long-term fiscal condition if it repeatedly relies on appropriated fund balance, meaning cash forward, to finance ongoing operating costs rather than one-time needs. So yes, these councils did adopt balanced budgets, but they didn't know they were adopting a balanced budget that was continuously drawing down from savings. So that's a little bit of the history. Take a pause here, and we're going to speak now about this current fiscal situation that we're in, the current budget. We have projected revenues if council, if we as a city, either through ad valorem taxes or other revenue streams, if we do not increase our revenues from what they currently are, then we project we'll bring in $16.2 million this year. Our projected expenses now are $20,258. Now, I began earlier by saying we had a $5 million deficit. That's true. Staff has managed to trim potential expenses next fiscal year by $1 million. We can talk about what that is. But this is the situation that we're in right now that this council has to address. Reserve requirements of 16.7% are also hanging in the balance. What's wrong way there? So let's talk a little bit about the preliminary cuts that we've done, and this is not a complete list. So the community understands we've already whacked personnel costs by $250,000 in those different categories listed. We've eliminated operating expenses by $86,000, almost $87,000. And we've eliminated just about every capital improvement project from the general fund, except for a few which we'll review for the community. This is a busy slide. If you focus on the orange highlighted areas, up at the top you have your fiscal year columns. The very far left is the number that we assign the project. Next to that is what the project is. To the right of that is fiscal year 26-27, the year that we are in the middle of budgeting for. And all those orange bands represent a capital project that was moved to next fiscal year. What is still listed at the top is municipal impact fee and community development fee study at $90,000. If our city attorney were here, he would chime in, and you can ask him later. We can certainly do an impact fee study in-house. We'd probably pay more than $90,000 in salary and benefits to do it, and it won't be as legally defensible should someone challenge it. That's why we are highly recommended by statute to, not required, but recommended that we contract that service out. So we left that cost in. It's up to the council to determine if it stays at this point. But we're at the point where if we want to increase our revenues through impact fees, we have to do this study. If we scroll down a little bit, you'll see fire services. They're totaling at $149,000. I have spoken with Chief Quinn, and they understand our situation. These were their initial projected numbers. They already did shave their pencil, if you will, sharpen their pencil on this, and they've agreed to go back and look further. And at some point when we hear back from them, we can bring some new numbers to the council. So that stands as it is now until we hear from them. And then if you go down to the Fillmore Avenue streetscape, that is a multi-million-dollar project, most of which is being paid for out of enterprise funds, stormwater in particular, but $160,000 of that coming from the general fund. That's not obviously the sum total of that project. We've already awarded that contract to a contractor, and they've met with the residents, and we're planning on continuing that project. And then we have some IT at the very bottom, $7,500 to maintain a backup site that we absolutely need by statute. So that's where we are with our capital improvement and for the community's benefit. We now get into our fixed costs. What we say are fixed, I mean, we can talk, again, they're highlighted in yellow: protective services, fire services, legal services. Solid waste is more or less a pass-through, collecting on behalf of the vendor and passing that money through. The city doesn't really generate any revenue from that. And then, of course, we have our debt service, which Joey can speak to how long that will take to, be removed from our budgets entirely. And we have our operating, personnel services, operating expenditures, and capital. Those are the three general fund expense categories that the council should focus on when it comes to any further reduction in costs, or I should say expenses this year. We're going to ask the council focus on personnel services, operating expenditures, and capital, if you so want to cut capital further. But you can see the math there and how those things add up. The revenue anticipated if we do not increase our revenue sources, and the difference at just over $4 million. We are still looking at cuts. These are internal, but as I've told all of you, we've come down $1 million. We still have $4 million to go. And we can, as a staff, go line by line. We can do zero-based budgeting without this council's direction, without question. But given the status of our finances and the time it's taken to get the information presented to you, what we've managed to do now, not spend $1.5 million this year and project a $1 million reduction next year, your staff has taken care of $2.5 million that had to be accounted for up until this point. And we feel like, of course, we have the June 30th deadline to present you with the budget, and we're presenting it to you as unbalanced and certainly not something I'm recommending you pass. But we need your assistance moving forward in what further reductions should you want to make, because it will arguably involve reduction in services, appearances in the community, programs, other things that are important to our residents, important to the council, important to our employees. It's time that we wade in together as a team. But here are some additional considerations. I mean, we're Parka, I'll move to that 20K from Parka, and they're itemized out to the right. That's just their continued recommendations. They've already made many, throwing that up there as a visual. That's in addition to what they've already cut from that department. We can obviously continue to do operational and personnel expenses, consolidation of positions. We've been doing that, and we can consider those things moving forward. Discussion about privatization options to include our facilities, the C5, Cape Center, Nancy Hansen. All of those things are certainly fair game for conversation for this council. And I want to prepare the community for those conversations. No one's saying it's going to happen, but we would be remiss as a government if we didn't discuss all options that are there. And of course, we have some mowing services that we contract out that we can look at modifying. Here's an overview of our situation, primarily from our general fund revenues. Again, this is general fund. We're not talking about enterprise, stormwater, sewer, reclaimed water. We're talking about general fund, which is where it's been the focal point of this conversation. You can see the large blue area is 40% of our revenue comes from ad valorem taxes. And I won't break them all down, but you see other financial sources, miscellaneous fines and forfeitures, charges for services, federal, state grants. These are all avenues to pursue, if possible, if legally allowed, to look at amending so that we can potentially increase those revenue streams. Other potential revenue, the community is very familiar with the paid parking conversation, and I would just like to make a statement. We've been looking at paid parking for years as an additional revenue stream to reduce the burden on our taxpayers. We are still considering that. It is not something that we're just now considering because we are in a financial situation. It is something we've always been considering. Tourism revenue options, we have heard from countless residents, why can't we get more revenue from other sources, particularly the hotels, the port? And it's our position that in order to get those things, we'll have to go to the legislature for that, the way the laws are written. They're listed as options to pursue. And of course, there's always millage property taxes as a revenue stream. Other things we're doing is evaluating our utility, evaluate wastewater, reclaim water, stormwater rates. We're in the 5th and final year of a study that was already done, and we have a recommendation on what to increase those rates to based on that study for council's consideration. We have to maintain long-term financial stability in those utility funds moving forward, doing another rate study when it's due. We have to support our ongoing infrastructure maintenance, regulatory compliance, and future capital improvements. I think it's important to note that we have a lot of infrastructure. People love our beaches and they have wooden crossovers. Those need to be repaired or replaced at some point in time. Always a consideration. Money doesn't grow on trees. We need to support reduce resilience on utility reserves by aligning revenues with the actual cost of providing services, and consider future rate adjustments through the formal rate studies and council review. This is going to be a shocking slide for some folks in the community, and it's a precursor to a conversation that we will have about our fund restoration. And if you look on the agenda for tonight's council meeting, you will see that I have proposed a 9.95 millage rate. And I know that's probably shocking to a lot of folks when our current millage rate is 3.12 and change. The reason that rate is so high, and I would like to explain the mechanics of the process to the community so they understand why they may, and the council doesn't mean the council is going to adopt that millage rate. What that means is the council is coming at the highest point possible, because we also have a millage rate for the library. I'm recommending that the council look at the highest rate possible today, because they have some determinations to make. First and foremost, they have an ordinance that they have to address that we are currently out of compliance in. If the council were to comply with the existing ordinance, then it would have to raise the millage rate to repair our unassigned fund balance this fiscal year. And in order to do that, the millage rate would be somewhere, 8.04? We'll look at that's 7.2 million. If we're going to do it immediately in compliance with the ordinance, that's what would have to happen. And that's why the council is discussing the ordinance tonight. So I don't know how many folks will listen to the meeting now, because I'm really trying to prevent your phones from ringing. It's my fault that the millage rate is as high as it is. I should say on the agenda as high as it is, because the council has to vote on what they're going to do to restore their fund balance, but they can't do that until they address the ordinance. The ordinance is compelling them to fix it within the next few months. And the millage rate that would accompany that cannot be achieved unless we walk into the meeting tonight at a 9.95 millage rate. The council will address it at that time. So for those, who know the value of your property, if you have a $250,000 home or whatever you are valued at, that shows what potential increases could be, not set in stone. Now, this is a slide that reflects proposed millage rates of all the communities in Brevard County, and this was acquired from each community in Brevard County, Cape Canaveral, and I know some council members will want to weigh in on millage and so forth later. I'm just showing the slide to the community. We don't have, ours is in yellow, that's our current millage rate. We did not reflect our proposed tonight, because if we did, it would be the top line, not third from the bottom. But we want to show the community what all other communities are doing. Why? Because they're going to ask, what's Satellite Beach doing? What's Melbourne Beach doing? What's West Melbourne doing? It's relevant to some folks, so we thought we'd save you the time of looking it up. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this slide because we're going to go into it in greater depth, but these are just snapshots of what a 2, 4, or 6 year reserve restoration plan look like. We have to get to our unassigned reserve requirement at 16.7%. We have our total budget expenses and unassigned reserve requirements, and there's your 2-year recovery, 4-year and 6-year. And again, we'll go into this in greater detail. It will make more sense when we get to that, council, in that portion of the presentation. And we've broken it down a lot differently, because not only do we have to account for, well, what we have to account for, folks, is if Amendment 3 passes, then what is our projected ad valorem taxes that will be available to us versus not. So we have to present this council with 2 sets of numbers throughout this budget process. They have to be mindful of Amendment 3, whether it passes or not. So they're going to have 2 sets of numbers to have to consider. That's why we're not going to go into this right now. Other factors to consider in the big picture: impact fees, wastewater, stormwater, reclaimed water, all those things. What, can we increase those? We still say unknown health insurance costs, but we're projected to experience an increase of 45%. And that's not just us, it's everywhere. And we're negotiating or getting some plan options right now, council. We're getting some plan options, and we have formed a working group within the city of employees who span all different types of health needs and so forth. And they are working on what would be the best plan for us based on users and so forth that we can propose. And again, the big unknown, which we've talked about, is the Amendment 3 there, 20% of potentially, it's about 21% of Canaveral homes could be exempt from those, property taxes. This is a little bit about the homestead exemption impact that we'll just show. Again, we'll get into this a little deeper later. But these numbers come from the property appraisers. We also have some numbers to show you later that came from the state. They're close but different. All right? I mean, those are the sources we're getting these numbers from, the property appraiser in the state of Florida. These, in particular, are from the property appraiser. We are looking at it, if Amendment 3 passes moving forward, a year from now, we will be talking about a $736,000 deficit in ad valorem taxes. And then year 2, increase that number to 927, an additional 190,000, as the slide says. So I want to pause now because I see where this is going. This is a potential for consideration. Obviously, no decision. We can pursue this option. We are now talking about how we can help with our situation by borrowing money from ourselves. So we've talked about the history, we've talked about the present, and now we're going to talk about the future, some options to consider. Should the council direct, and it bears some review and studying, and another reason why we're going to have more workshops. One option is an enterprise interfund loan, where basically we borrow from the stormwater fund and infuse that money into our general fund. We haven't come up with an exact number yet. We think it could be over $1 million, definitely $1 million. It could be a little over $1 million. And then we would pay ourselves back in a payment plan that we vote on and make sure it's legally sound at a very low interest rate. So it's not like we're going to be eaten up in interest and fees and whatnot. We're borrowing from ourselves. This is a lawful, legal option. Cities and counties have done it in the past, and it is something that this council can consider. If our numbers are accurate, you could potentially reduce the $4 million that we need to reduce our expenses by another $1 million, potentially. We'll have to dig into that. We want to talk a little bit about our situation with state oversight. I can tell you, come March, when we realized that our situation was what it was, we immediately called the state of Florida and said, you know what, we swung at 2 balls and missed, and we're getting ready to strike out with our third unfavorable rating. We are going to get an unfavorable rating because they're going to be assessing this fiscal year, not next year. We can bring in all the money in the world right now to restore our reserves, by the end of this, once we collect revenue, if you choose to do that, and we know that's tough. It doesn't matter because we're going to still get our third unfavorable rating. That triggers the JLAC audit process. It's triggered after 3 consecutive unfavorable audits. And it's basically the focus of this is on corrective actions, financial recovery, and demonstrated progress that we make to restoring our fund balance to what it needs to be. In our case, 16.7% currently. There's a financial emergency process, and it's a severe where basically the separate process talks about sincere financial distress, and the state provides oversight and recovery assistance. It's not an automatic state takeover. There are applicable Florida statutes that govern this. Like I said, we called the state of Florida and we explained to them our situation. And they understood. They said, we're not the only city to do this. That doesn't mean we're okay. It means we're in the boat with other cities and counties that have done this perhaps. And they have a plan for us and they want to see progress. And they commended us for reaching out and telling them in advance. That was definitely commendable. And so there's our summary. And I'm not going to read from the slide. I'll just reiterate this to you. We have the challenges that we have before us right now is we have to continue to not spend in the remaining 2 months and preserve what we've not spent thus far so we can apply that to next fiscal year. That's job one, and I can tell you, your finance director and the rest of our staff are dedicated to making sure that we not spend as much as possible between now and September 30th. That's thing one. Thing two is during this budget process, we have to figure out what we're going to do. We have to balance a budget. We have $4 million that we have to cut, for lack of a better term. We have to do what we can to increase revenues. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean taxes, property taxes. We have to increase revenues. And we have to achieve what we're going to call equilibrium. How much are we going to reduce what we're projected to spending versus how much do we believe we can increase revenues, and where are we going to meet? And when we achieve that equilibrium, we're going to have to look at the city and say, is this the kind of city that we want to be? What kind of city do we want to be? What kind of services do we want to offer? What kind of facilities do we want to have? What kind of programs do we want to have? And these are tough decisions that this council has to make, and I'll be honest with you, I've come to know you all, and I don't envy you. I don't. Not only do you need to balance the budget, you need to come up with a fund restoration plan. How many years are we going to take to rebuild our reserves to get to 16.7%? Bearing in mind that we have the potential for Amendment 3 on the horizon, and that we have impact fee reduction, other statutes that we can share with you that are out there. And bearing in mind that we do, and I'm not trying to be a fearmonger, but we do live in a hurricane state. And I don't want to have to, and for any other reason that we may have to tap into our new savings for reserves, we put a bunch in the bank and then something happens and now we don't have what we wanted in the bank. Those are the considerations that we have to take into account. So that's the summary. I can pause. Joey has the next slide presentation to talk about fund restoration plans with Amendment 3, without Amendment 3. I don't know, Mayor, if you want to take a recess. I know we're going to have public comment when the presentation is over. If you want, we'll just transition into this. It's your call.
Thank you very much. I'm following along on 4.2. So that concludes the 15-year overview and current fiscal update.
Yes. Okay, so I don't have my agenda in front of me. So.
That's okay. And then I think the next one, 4.2, that was 4.2A. 4.2B says expenditure reduction measures to date, capital improvement projects. Was that?
We did that in the slide presentation.
4.2C says fiscal year 26-27 challenges. I believe
yes.
That was a part of the presentation.
Yeah, I think I can help you here, and we can skip down to 4.4.
Okay, so we've completed all of 4.2A through
yes.
C and all of 4.3A, B, and C. And
Yes.
we're now going to 4.4 fiscal year 26-27 revenue opportunities.
Yes, I'll be brief with this. I'll come back up there. I don't have any slides for this.
Council, do we
The
wanna-
clerk can put something up for us when we get to it, and I'll cue her up on that.
Let's, if we could pause here.
Sure.
Just take at least 5 minutes when we're all back, if we can. We'll circle back and we'll pick up right here.
Sounds good. Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Before we pause, do we have the presentation that Joey is about to give?
Physically, the document,
Yeah.
it's on the screen, I believe the city clerk is working. I don't think we have
No.
a printout of it.
The reserve restoration presentation, you do not have, it will be on your screen. It's a PowerPoint, and then, of course, we can get that to you like this other one, and it'll all be incorporated in the minutes.
Okay.
But you'll see it on your screen.
Well, I know, but I'm a note taker, so.
That's right. Can we get you a pen? A
I'll
pad?
take pictures of it. Thank you.
So
Well, if we're going to take a recess, maybe we can print some up. No?
That's fine.
Okay.
we'll
Thank
go
you.
ahead and recess, and when we're all back, we'll reconvene. Thank you. Was that, I didn't know what it was. Oh, gosh. Hopefully everything's okay. My wife would have called. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, so. Okay, so my question comes, since this is new to all of us, as council approves this, no, the balls from so since this is new, I just like to draw. Thank you. I'm a note taker. It's hard when I don't have the back. Okay. So the variances really come in later. Well, no, I mean, if there were variances, if you come in with the actual site plan information, which plan, then that would be addressed versus a conceptual plan. So on the conceptual plan, everything is, see,
So what they do is they submit the site plan application. Apply with the code. They want something and they're not going to want it. It's part of that. Then they have to set it in conjunction with the site plan. How are you consider it one Oh, gosh. Everything all right?
My wife called me if it was you. I think they must be fixing the building. Yeah.
because all this is like,
This is the best soap opera on the air.
look at that.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Willis, how are you doing, sir? No, I'm not.
We're going to get started in just a little bit, maybe a few more minutes here, just letting everyone know. And as soon as Mayor Pro Tem Jackson gets back, if that's okay with the council, we'll reconvene. Everything okay?
Usually that doesn't go off unless I'm cooking.
I took mine out of the kitchen a couple times because I'm like, I use Simply Say, and they're so good. You know, if it goes off, they'll call, is everything okay? And if not, if they don't hear back, they'll notify the fire department. But one day I was searing of the steak, and I got the whole first floor. Christina's coughing. I'm like, open a window.
I think it'd be interesting to know if they can tell how many people are watching online.
They can, if they're using that go to webinar, it'll usually say, who,
That would be,
yeah, and it'll give a report at the end of the times the users logged in, logged on, total time, how many total. Remember we looked at that
Yeah.
when we were looking back on it. But yeah, it would be.
Thank you, Lisa. Joe.
A little warm for me.
I wonder if the AC's.
I know. You go one of the bathrooms, the sink is broke. You're like, jeez. I'll ask him, see if maybe he can turn it.
She finally put that through. I was gonna have to rewrite it. It would be expired. I finally ventured to Merida. Only took how many months?
All right. He's checking on the AC.
Oh, AC.
Thought maybe it was just me, a little warm.
No, I was warm too, but it's only like 73.
I know, it feels good though. I brought a sweater just in case.
That battle has been going on for years.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to go? All right. Hey, good afternoon. Call the meeting back to order. It is 2:22 p.m. We are in the section 4.4 of the workshop here. Received presentations from our city manager and staff, and this item is titled Fiscal Year 26-27 Revenue Opportunities. And City Manager, I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Council. I don't know that this is really the time to discuss in depth. This is more for, your benefit. As you know, we've talked about these things, but also for the community's benefit to understand those things that we are considering. Paid parking, for one, is something that, despite there's been some vocal opposition to the concept, we understand that, and we also understand that it's a lawful means of collecting revenue. We understand that as we progress in conversations about that, should the council want to entertain that topic, that we could, be met with that. But I must tell you that we do believe the vast majority of residents would be in favor of paid parking. So it's listed here as an option for consideration, as is local option fuel tax. We can get into that in depth later at some other point, but this is something that we get from the county. And of course, we would have to, get them to agree to get some more our way, increase it however that's done. So that's an option for us to consider. We also mentioned briefly about legislative measures, and this is something that doesn't happen overnight. There are some statutes out there that we can look at to see if how they could apply to us both at the state and federal level. Can't make any promises on what kind of progress we'll make. We certainly need the support of our legislators to make those types of things happen. And we've always talked about having conversations with the port. And I know that's nothing new. And so we will certainly reach out to them and have meaningful conversations about our relationship. It doesn't just have to deal with revenue, but how can we help the port in marketing what they do and be a satellite city to that. How can we help them and how can they help us? So those types of conversations need to be had. And then proposed solid waste contingency fee ordinance. I have a document that we can put up for the council to look at. And again, for the public's benefit, no one's saying this is going to happen because it would result in an increase in a fee to the consumer. But by law, we can tack on an additional fee for the purpose of creating a solid waste contingency fund. And this would be separate and independent from what's already charged consumers. This revenue would go into a special fund for specific purposes. And if you scroll down, there are some examples: removal of illegally dumped debris, extraordinary, well, you're going too fast there. Extraordinary yard waste collection, following tropical storms. I'll just hit a few of them: extraordinary landfill tipping fees, emergency debris collection, other unforeseen things. So this is not uncommon. And it is something for this council's consideration. Funds would not be transferred to the general fund or used for unrelated governmental purposes. They would be used for the specific purpose and intent in which the fund was created, should the council choose to entertain this as a way to increase revenue for our residents. I'm sure you'll get comments from the public at some point. And that really completes. I mean, then of course you have item number E. Well, let me thank you. There is a page 2. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead and bring that back up just for the council's benefit and the public. My apologies. So to promote transparency and fiscal accountability, the ordinance would require these types of things. And of course, we'll get our city attorney to weigh in on these measures: creation of a restricted solid waste fund, annual review, use of funds solely for specific authorized purposes. There will be annual reporting to this council, and of course, periodic reviews. The benefit to stabilize the city's sanitation enterprise, and then have additional revenue to handle those things we talked about, and of course, reduce reliance on general fund revenues for those matters that we would have to deal with, because our current agreement with our solid waste provider has us having to pay extra already for those things that we might need above and beyond their regular service agreement. And so that currently comes out of our general fund. And so we can certainly look at if, we can't project what that would be every year. I can't even tell you what we've had to pay extra in the past fiscal years, but that is a term of our contract. So we can explore those issues, if you will, moving forward. So thank you for putting that back up, ladies. And then the last thing on the agenda, of course, is the millage rate. And, that's just another revenue opportunity for you to discuss. So it's also a good segue into the next portion of our presentation, which is the fund balance restoration plans that we have for your consideration. And before I turn the microphone over to Joey Blackard, our finance director, you're going to see numbers that reflect both Amendment 3 if it passes and if it doesn't pass. And again, just for the public, again, we have to have this conversation because it ties directly into an ordinance issue that you'll deal with tonight, and of course, ultimately, whatever tentative millage rate you adopt this evening. So, having said that, I'll turn the microphone over to Joey.
Okay, so we're going to dive into the presentation specifically of the millage rates, depending on the various scenarios that can happen going forward. Next. So we're going to talk about the millage rate options or rates that are necessary to be in compliance with the city's code. The city has 2 codes, which we'll go over through the rest of this presentation. For each of those codes, we'll be providing the scenario of if Amendment 3 passes, because the city will lose taxable the city will lose its ability to tax a certain amount of property, so that will affect the city's revenue moving forward, and we will dive more into that going forward. Additionally, staff is looking for council direction on how to approach this budget and moving forward. And potentially, if council can direct the city manager to prepare an alternative fund balance restoration plan for council consideration, and we will dive into all of these throughout the rest of this presentation. Okay, so as I mentioned, the city has two codes that relate to its amount of reserves the city has to have. It has one code, we'll call it code 2208, and it has another code called code 2210. This is important to remember because each code requires a different amount of reserves for the city. Specifically, code 2208 requires 16.7% of the adopted budget. And code 2210 requires, in our situation, will require 20% of operating expenditures. So that is a key difference that we'll hone in on. So we have two codes requiring two different levels of reserves in the city. And specifically, the code related to our operating expenses, for our internal analysis, we've been using operating expenses as our operating category in the city's budget. We have gone ahead and used that definition since the definition is not clarified in the city code of ordinances or the charter. So comparing the two city codes we have, one is more restrictive than the other. In other words, one calls for a higher amount of reserves than the other. So therefore, if we're in compliance with one of the codes, we are in compliance with both of the codes. That is the idea we want to get across here. So specifically, code 2208 is more restrictive than 2210. So the calculation of code 2208 is based on the total adopted budget. The preliminary adopted budget is $20 million. 16.7% of that amount is $3.3 million. That is one of the reserve levels the city has to be in compliance with if the city wants to be in compliance with their own reservation requirements. The other code, code 2210, requires the city to have 20% of annual operating expenses, and in the preliminary budget we've provided, the operating expenses are $13.8 million. Therefore, 20% of that is $2.7 million. And I will summarize this here. So the point we're trying to get across is the city has two codes that require a different amount of reserves. One code requires more. One code requires nearly $3.4 million in reserves. The other code requires nearly $2.8 million in reserves. So now that we've gone over what the city needs in reserves to be in compliance with the city's own code, we will show some calculations of millage rates that can get the city to be in compliance with their own reserves, while taking into account if Amendment 3, the Homestead Exemption Bill, passes. So this slide shows the effect of Amendment 3 on the city of Cape Canaveral. So the first fiscal year we see here, the first of the three, going from fiscal year 2027 all the way to fiscal year 2029, the city currently has the ability to tax on $2.1 billion. With this homestead exemption, the city will lose the ability to tax on property within the city. Therefore, the city will lose revenues. This projection has been given to us from the Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office. They are projecting that the city of Cape Canaveral, after the first year of Amendment 3, the city of Cape Canaveral will lose around $736,000 in revenue. And the year after that, will lose an additional $190,000 for a total loss over 2 years of $927,000. So again, the point we're making here is if Amendment 3 passes, the city will be able to generate less revenue based on taxes. And we're taking into account some of those projections. Are there any questions as of now? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
Sorry, one last question here. You know I can't go a few minutes without a question. Okay, on the slide that is blue prior to this one, okay, so it discusses and the prior slide to that, it discusses that we have the two different code sections. We have Code 208, which says equal to at least 16.7 of the adopted budget, so that'd be the entire budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had 210 that is based only on the operating expenses. So when I look at this slide that we're looking at here, which code supersedes the other, and why would we have two? So this is probably for our city attorney, just to give you a heads up there, city attorney. Why would we have two codes with a different definition?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. City Attorney, would you like to answer this?
I don't have an answer to why that was written in there the way it has been, but it does measure two baselines, right? As the finance director indicated. So you end up with two different results. Why, there's two different, sections measuring two different baselines. I can't answer that question.
Is this something that we should possibly put on our radar to clean up later? Because if for someone new, that could cause confusion.
I can weigh in. I think we might have all been, with the exception of Councilmember Shoryak and King. I agree with you. And I think the intentions were to reduce it from the 20%, and the GFOA recommendation said 16.7, I believe. And I believe it was genuinely oversight because the intent, I think, is met with the existing code without changing anything, 20% of operating expenditures threshold, and then there's a section that talks about what happens if you fall below 17%, which I believe was just a little bit over that recommendation. And so that's my comments. If they are conflicting or not useful, they certainly, I think, create confusion. But
I think I can add a little bit more.
Yes.
Okay.
My take on these two reserve levels is one, and I'll go to them. The section 208 is the 16.7% compared to the adopted budget. That one, all it states is that you have to have 16.7% of your adopted budget. There's no timeline related to it. Whereas the code 2210 says if you fall below 17% of your reserves compared to your operating expenditures, then you have 2 years to get above 20% of your unassigned reserves compared to your operating expenditures. So the code 2210 gives a sense of urgency to if you find yourself below your reserves, it gives 2 years to get back into compliance. Although it's not complete compliance compared to 208, which 208 doesn't mention anything. If you're below it, you have to be back into compliance within a certain amount of time, whereas section or code 2210 does, if that puts a little more context to it.
So it looks to me like 208 literally defines the lowest that we can be, right? And then 210 is literally saying you can, normally you'd have 20%. If you drop below that, you've got 2 years to. So it may there may be reasons for having them both, but maybe we need to clean up the language a little as we move forward. I don't know. I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah, if I may, I don't know how historic these ordinances are and how far we'd have to go back to check agenda items and minutes. But I can say that if you're in compliance with 208, you're in compliance with 210 from a dollar standpoint, percentage standpoint. But if you fall below in 210, then that triggers the 2-year requirement to restore the fund balance. So when you're seeking compliance with our code from a percentage standpoint, you need to focus on the higher amount, not the lower amount, per existing codes, if that makes sense. The 16.7%, which is the 3.3 whatever million.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number we have to reach in whatever fund balance, restoration plan that you implement.
I traced back to the 2008 council meetings when the auditors changed and that 2-210 was in place. I didn't go back any further, but obviously 2-208 was a year or two ago.
Yeah, and I want to say, well, you reduced it. I mean, the code existed, but you reduced it from 20 to 16.7%, and but it did exist. I think, in all fairness, the existence of these two ordinances, there must be some reason, and I think we should probably dive, to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, we can dive into why they exist, as they both pertain to different facets of our budget.
Well, we don't ever want to be here again, that's for certain.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think having clear definitions for who might be on council in the future may help. Okay, that was my only question so far. Thank you.
Any other questions for team at this time? Thank you.
Okay, so the last slide we were going over was the impacts of Amendment 3, the homestead tax exemption, on the city's revenues. So this slide will compare, we'll go over code 2208 and the millage rates mathematically necessary to be back into compliance with city code. So how to read this slide is the first column on the left, the restoration period. This means in the upcoming fiscal year, if we need to make up $3.3 million in our reserves, we need to add that amount of money to the reserves plus balance our budget of nearly $4 million. So therefore, we need an additional revenue of $7.4 million. How do we get $7.4 million in additional revenue? That would require a millage of 8.1692.
And if I can interject, if we don't increase other revenue streams, 8.1 is the millage rate. And this is on here because if council has, you're in the final phase of your 2-year window to comply with the code. And that's why this item is on the agenda tonight. You have to determine how to proceed with the code that you must comply with unless you address it in some other fashion tonight. If you decide you're going to comply with the code, then this pretty much determines your millage rate right here. That's why this FY 26-27 number is there. And this is why we came in at 9.95 for this discussion. Just to reiterate, we don't know what you're going to do with the ordinance before you set the millage rate.
Are there any questions on this slide and how to read this slide?
No, and not for me, at least at this time. And we can come back to these if we, and I'm sure we will. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so this was the millage necessary to reach the reserve requirement of the $3.3 million. Now this is the millage required to meet the reserve requirement of $2.7 million. And it's the same idea as the slide we just looked at.
And if I could just qualify this isn't happening independent. You follow 208, these numbers will follow. This is just showing you what our ordinance says in relation to the other ordinance, and you see the amounts are different for a reason. But the code you need to comply with immediately is 208. That's what's on the agenda. I'm sorry, 210 is on the agenda. But if you meet 208 numbers, because that's what the ordinance says, at 16.7, then you will meet these numbers.
Okay. I'll move on to the next slide. Again, we can come back and talk about these numbers, these slides in the future if council wishes. So this slide shows other impacts, other projections of if Amendment 3, the homestead tax exemption, takes places. So we went over those previous calculations based on Brevard County's projections, but there's another projections that have been done by, there was a conference held where people looked into projecting this exactly type of thing, where they see revenue loss. The city of Cape Canaveral will lose more revenue than Brevard County. They're similar on the first year, saying the city of Cape Canaveral would lose around $730,000 in the first year, but after that they start to differ. And that's because people are projecting things, taking different things into account. We don't truly know what's going to happen, but people are trying to make projections. There's a high-level summary of it. And just the point is we're just showing two different projections. We went with the Brevard County ones on the left, which are lower than other estimates being made currently. I'll go to the next slide. So this is a summary of everything we just went over. As in how soon would council like to be in compliance with the reserves that the city code states. And we went over the millage rates required to do that. We took into account Amendment 3, the homestead exemption. And to summarize all of that, staff is looking for council direction to the city manager to propose alternative fund balance restoration plans. And that is the end of this presentation.
Thank you.
So council, for this council and for the public, we just went through item 4.2D. We skipped it so that we can save this for the end. And that's what that was on your agenda, 4.2D. And that is essentially our presentation to you to kick off this workshop. And I turn the microphone over to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all who has helped get us here and understanding the realities of today. I think the first thing I want to say that as we're kind of taking this in and observing is this is going to take us some time. And one of the things historically and just the nature of elected office and somewhat of the older culture was these workshops would be like 30 minutes prior. I mean, this council has not ever had 30 minutes, and it was minimal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was sort of, here it is. You really didn't have any concerns from the council at the time. And over the years, we've seen it evolve. And I think from what we've learned and understand today, that's the first big observation is while it didn't happen overnight or quickly, the one regret that I think I would have is, first, I believe wholeheartedly this council and our city staff, we're gonna get this on the right track. I believe in us. I believe in this city, and but I don't think we're gonna be able to do it if we're pressed for time. We have to act swiftly and as we can, and I think we do have the time to do it right. And I know that takes resources from our staff. But one of the communication gaps is, we don't really meet together. And I think we are going to have to obviously lean on our staff to get this far as we did today. And then really give every council member and our city staff the time each one of us feels to understand it and to move forward. And so at some point, whether we have a hard stop at 5 or not, one of the things that I'm thinking of is thinking ahead and saying, you know, between now and the budget agenda, this is one workshop. We usually have two, if not 3. We've obviously got 2 readings, and there are some immediate deadlines with the proposed or tentative millage rate. We'll address those. And so that's what I wanted to comment on, and maybe we can find some time over the coming weeks that we can allocate to give this what it deserves. So the second thing, which we've led with today, and I greatly appreciate, and some of the questions from Mayor Pro Tem, and we've got more, is in that time just really starting with the code and understanding the code. And something I think that would really help us now is the time is like a code compliance checklist every year as a part of the budget. If you took the code, it can be confusing and things, but this is an administrative function that the council could look at and go, you know, section 210, you know, check, and go down, and then we're making sure things don't fall through the cracks. I think if that's something that this council and city staff would consider. And we've done strategic planning in the past, big picture stuff, you know, things. And I think the restoration plan that city staff is asking is sort of this year's strategic plan. And I think when I talk about time, you know, maybe we can find, like today, 3, 4, even 5-hour window that we can really come in, be able to roll up the sleeves and figure it out. And so if that's something the council will consider, I would like to give us a little time before we end. We don't have to do it now, is to try and identify at least a date or 2. And I think it would be wise to keep this code. We've already started with the code in front of us, and we can go down the list and feel good and confident about what we're doing here. And at that point, we can, you know, get into priorities and spending and all the different ideas we've had. And so, again, thank you all so much. I believe in us, and I know the community supports us, and we will get through it. So,
Our people.
council, we heard a lot. We can go back to anything. If there's any initial comments or questions, I think for staff or clarifying, that now would be a good time. But before we really get into it, we do have, I believe, some public, at least one card here. And also received an email from some public comments that I definitely want to recognize it and make sure they're on the record. Are there any questions before we go to the public this time? Okay. So the card, Mr. Michael Corrigan, are you here with us today? If you're willing and able, take your time, come on up, and thank you so much for being here. We got 3 minutes. I think you've done this before. And
Yeah, I'm Michael Corrigan. I
Thank
live
you.
in the Bermuda House. I'm the condominium president. It's a small 10-unit condominium. I'm about a block and a half from the beach. This system that you're talking about, charging parking, to me is abhorrent. We have good neighbors here in Florida, in other cities, and we're taking our problems and putting it on them. They didn't cause it. The city caused it. We caused it. We caused it because we didn't show up for the meetings. I have to opt out in a little bit. I've had 2 knee surgeries and open heart surgery over the last 3 years, so I haven't shown up here. And I just retired last year. And last week I turned 80. So I'm still going to be involved now in the city and show up more. But when you look at this parking, there's a lot of things that go into it. How are you going to do it? Who's going to administrate it? Who's going to
give the certificates out to park? Are we going to have local residents that don't have to pay for parking? Yet it's our city that caused the problem. Using CR codes at a lot of these parking lots. I don't go to cities and I don't go to shopping areas that have parking, that paid parking, especially with the CR codes. It's still a little daunting to me. I'm fairly computer literate, but it's becoming a real pain to do all this stuff. So I shy away from it. How many people are we shoppers and people coming to the city to do business are going to shy away from things like that? How many people are going to not maybe come to the hotels here to go to the beach because of the parking fees out there? I think it's counterproductive. I think in the long run, you end up with not as much money as you think you're going to get and a lot of ill will. The city of Titusville has just put in cameras at the school zones for ticketing. It is a nightmare. They are not in compliance with state statutes. They don't know when the school's day starts with each school or stops. They've got half their cameras don't work. They got school zones in the wrong place. Titusville High School, they pick up and drop off on Highway 1. The school zone's on the back of the property, which is delivery gates. So, because the Department of Transportation has said, well, they consider that the school zone. It's not. So the whole thing is a mess. I hope you reconsider the parking fees at the beach. I think they're wrong. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan. And you said it was Bermuda
Bermuda House.
The Bermuda House?
Circle Drive.
Circle Drive?
Just right down the street from McDonald's.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for being here and participating. Were there any other, that's the only comment card I have. Is there anyone else who intended to speak? If so, we would ask you can come on forward and maybe we ask you do fill out a card. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you. Gwendolyn.
My name is Gwendolyn Lisa Hagar. I'm at 509 Washington. And I guess today is like the first in a mini series of budget meetings. And I wanted to find out how citizens can contribute recommendations or alternatives for revenue opportunities in the city, who we would provide those to. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to give some immediate feedback on that, I think if the council desires, we have an existing schedule. We'll make sure that it's in our budgets on I forget the exact page, whether or not the council adds more dates to it. I think it's a good idea. I think our city staff will make sure the various channels that people, and specifically you asking, know when and how to participate. And thank you so much for your willingness to do so.
And Mayor, we'll always take email input from residents.
Thank you. Okay. And we are live streaming, just want to confirm.
Yes.
Is there any indication of how many people are with us right now? Just curious. Okay. That's great. Well, that concludes. I'll ask one more time, anyone else who intends to speak, please come forward or would like to. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public participation. And I don't think we're doing the live stream digitally. We haven't done, I didn't want to offer something. Okay, thank you. All right, council, we've gotten through city staff presentations, asked a few questions, clarified. We've heard from our community, Mr. Corrigan and Ms. Hagar, and I believe at this time at 2:59 at 3 p.m., the hope is to have a hard stop at 5. It's a workshop, no particular order. Councilmember Shoryak.
Do we have the comment, the typed up one?
Oh my gosh,
Mr. Campbell?
you're exactly right. Yes. Thank you. We received an emailed public comment from Mr. Patrick Campbell, who lives on, as noted in here, 307 Surf Drive. I believe, council, that we all received that. Unless this council opposes, I think we've let the record show we've all received it and read it, and I think our appropriate city staff has been aware. I don't plan on reading this completely through, but just to acknowledge and respond, some of the questions largely are, well, entirely are around the paid parking program, like we heard today from Mr. Corrigan noted, and the organization of the email listed some specific questions that I know our city manager has been made aware of, and also some that would pertain to potentially our city attorney. And the ultimate sentiment is the opposition to paid beach parking with some of the reasoning. Thank you again, Mr. Campbell. I do want to just respond to the revenue paid parking comments and say I know that this council is working through it. I think a lot of the questions around the cost and the benefit, I think we would all want to know and clearly understand before going forward, especially after the first attempt. And I have full confidence that nothing is going to change without this council fully understanding and being aligned with the community on those cost questions and some of the concerns really around the culture and what Cape Canaveral has maintained for many years, no paid parking. And so that's one piece of potential solution that I think we're going to have to weigh in and beyond what we've heard today and received via email, additional social media, direct emails. We've got a lot of great feedback to weigh in. And my thought is simple. If we can't overcome anything this council think is valid, I don't see why we would do it. But I do think some of those we should pursue and try to overcome. And I think many of them we can and will. But it won't happen without open discussion. So thank you, Councilmember Shoryak. That is all I have for public comments. I don't think we received any other by email. So that is in the record. We'll go ahead and now officially close public participation. Mayor Pro Tem?
I just had a comment on the public parking thing, and this, of course, would not be immediately, but if we do elect to leave public parking without charges, we need to really look at, not for this fiscal year or even during the years that we're restoring the budget, but we really need to start looking at facilities at the end of some of these streets, because we have one restroom at Sherry Down, there's restrooms at Jetty Park, and all the way to the pier. And when we have a lot of people coming to the beach and they don't have the facilities they need, we have people utilizing the dunes for things that we may not want. So we may want to look at a CIP that covers constructing restrooms, because we would be the one beach in our county and all the way to North Volusia that doesn't have paid parking. So we're going to have to look at how we accommodate the public with that as we move forward.
Thank you. All right, council, chime in as you will. We'll try to stay out of each other's way and talk.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Willis.
Before we get to a hard stop, let's go ahead and look at the calendar.
Thank you. I think that's a good idea.
I think if Joey can remind us what is on the schedule, and then let's see what we can add to it. Because I really like your idea of more opportunity to sit and talk. There's a lot of options here.
Is it page 11? I think that's in the budget book.
Yes, it is page 11 in the budget.
Okay. And so I guess the legal deadlines are really important out of those. Potentially all of them, maybe at some point, are legally required, but like the DR 420, that's a really important one for the property appraiser. So what is the next, I guess, legal deadline? Tonight we'll be considering in the agenda, I saw there's tentative millage rate, and then it was stricken, and I think there was proposed. Which one is it that we're
Tonight is the proposed millage.
proposed? And then we will have first reading of a tentative and then a second reading of a final. Okay. Is that the next step in, I guess, state law is the proposed has a deadline?
The
6:30?
proposed would have a deadline on August 4th, because on August 4th, we have to submit our proposed millage to the county property appraiser. And from that day, August 4th, when we submit it, it is important because the city cannot go higher in their tax rate, but they can go lower.
So DR 420 is whatever we decide, whether it's tonight or throughout, will give our city the ability to submit that proposed rate with those conditions. I do want to just kind of address that can't go higher. I know that, I think we brought this up in the past, I thought there was technically a way that in the event a city adopted a rate and then found out they needed to go higher, city attorney, it might come with extra costs or maybe remailing trim notices, I don't know, but is there a path?
Yes, your recollection is correct. Once the notice goes out in the mail with the proposed millage, the city council could not exceed the proposed millage in the initial notice that went to the property owners. If the council during the budget process decided that, well, we want to go above the proposed millage, then the city would have to re-notice the property owners with the higher proposed millage, and that would be at the city's expense rather than the tax collector's expense.
Okay. And probably 6,000 properties or whatever, so it comes with a cost. Thank you. I like the approach of we'd rather not have to do that, but I guess it is good to know. So August 4th is the date, the next legal deadline that we need to make a decision on that. And that's one reading as early as tonight. And maybe that's the only opportunity, but then the next one is that September 8th. Oh yeah, well there's a workshop on the 18th and all the publication and legal requirements around that, but the first reading, I guess the tentative would be the next. So we'd adopt proposed, then we would vote. Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. Now this is just our regular schedule that we adopted back in November. So the tentative would need, what do we have that, I guess when is that due to the property appraiser?
The tentative millage rate is technically not due to the property appraiser.
Okay.
The only thing that would be due is the final adopted millage rate would have to be transmitted so the tax rolls can be properly created.
So September 18th. Okay, so we would adopt a proposed, that would go in as the DR 420 to the appraiser by August 4th. We would have a tentative internally when we have a second reading on the final. Then we would have to have that second reading done prior to the 18th. And it looks like we've scheduled 3 days prior, September 15th. If I know I'm kind of working backwards here, but council, I think that seeing these deadlines are important. If there's any opportunities that we could work or extend the times of, that's the other thing we could do, is potentially give ourselves more time. I see workshops around 5 or 6:30. So that's it. What do we think?
I think if we could possibly on the 18th meet several hours earlier.
On August
18th.
So there's a budget workshop at 5:30.
Well, on our calendar it says 5, but in here it says 5:30. But on the calendar it says 5.
And it says the 18th here, and that says the 19th. Oh.
8/18.
Oh, I was reading it wrong. Yes, I see it does say the day, so that's correct.
But if we could meet at maybe 2 or 3, get some extra time to discuss it. Or take it a week earlier in an afternoon.
Yeah, I think we're obviously on the 21st. We met at 1 today. The next scheduled meeting on August 18th is at 6 on the schedule that we adopted in the book. It's printed 5:30. I think irrelevant. We want to be, I agree. I think we should meet earlier. I'm erring even towards maybe a little earlier even than that. So what do we think? Because we do have a council meeting that night, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think at least 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Because we more than likely won't be getting presentations necessarily, just discussing options. That
You'll no doubt make requests of staff. You'll want to see new information. We'll probably be putting it all together for you in some fashion, no doubt.
I absolutely agree. Meeting earlier in the day at 2 p.m. is better than this, and I think the only thing, well, let's just assume that's what we did. The next hearing is a couple weeks later, and that's a standalone hearing on September 3rd. That's our first. That's publicly noticed, so it's important. So really, we have workshop today, and that 18th is the second workshop. What I was leaning towards, while I agree with 2 p.m. on that day, is there just a standalone day if needed? It looks like we would have time between the 18th and the 3rd. Maybe we see how we're doing on the 18th. If we get out of there and feel great about it, we'll wait till the 3rd first hearing. If we feel like we need more time, we'd, I think, have a couple weeks to try and work that in. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
I just think we should go ahead and schedule the time, since we're really going to be going over details on that next one.
Mm-hmm.
Schedule it like we've done today, where we here at 1 and give ourselves a time, because if we got through early, that just gives us a little bit more of a break, but before council meeting. And as far as having any additional time, we'll just have to work that in after that meeting, because I know when we start looking at the actual details, and I don't know what you plan on doing today, whether that's something that we should start doing, is looking at the actual details that we've been provided. When you get to that point in the process, that's where it starts taking some time, when you start identifying and exploring the options that we have to look at. So I just think that having it the same amount of time, is
1 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, City Manager?
So 2 things. Just a reminder that you do have an optional council date always on your schedules every month, and August 4th is listed as, your optional council day, if that's something that you want to consider for a workshop. And then secondly, to Mayor Pro Tem's point about whatever you're going to speak today, given the fact that you have to address the ordinance tonight and the millage tonight, I would suggest you spend time discussing those two items in advance of the council meeting, so that you are better focused and ready to decide this evening on those two issues. I did recommend to all of you at some point that you look at changing the order of two items on the agenda so that you can deal with the ordinance first and then the millage rate second, which you need to do before you can talk millage. But just a recommendation for your conversation this afternoon is prepare for that tonight, maybe.
Councilmember Shoryak?
I think a good idea, maybe we could have something, well, I think 1 to 5 before the next council meeting is a great idea on the 18th, but maybe either on the 4th or maybe 11th or one other night thing, have something for a couple hours in the evening so people who work can come out and make comments, because we're going to have all kinds of suggestions and changes. I think 1 to 5 kind of limits people, and if we have something starting 6 or 7, maybe we do a couple hours. I think that will be helpful to us and also the citizens who want to give some input.
I guess my immediate concern, I agree with that 100%, is we definitely want to have some evening time availability, and if we are going to pick a date for that, I'm looking at this 4th. To our city manager's point, if that reserve date on the 4th, that's the same day the trim is due, or the DR 420 is due. So I guess tonight's vote, which comes with a potential cost, is a really big one. And my thought would be to have an opportunity to meet, whether it be Monday the 3rd, standalone, that would be potentially a good evening one. And then that would be at least 24 hours before it's due. So I think let's take them one at a time. How about we have the workshop on the 18th. Councilmember Willis, who recommended 2 p.m. Mayor Pro Tem said 1 p.m. Is anything you've said, Councilmember Shoryak, are you okay with at least having that earlier in the day?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to have something in the evening so people who work can come out, and if they have an opinion on it, they could express it. Because paid parking is a big thing, and if that comes up, people are going to want to comment on it. And I think we need to give them the opportunity, not just during the day.
Councilmember King, any comments? Just trying to take them one at a time. We're talking about the 18th, scheduled at 5:30 or 6. Would there be any concern with meeting at 1 or 2 p.m.? Either way, earlier than what we have.
I can accommodate my schedule for that.
Okay. Councilmember Willis, do you have any concern with 1 p.m.?
No.
Okay, let's try to tackle that one, and let's make a motion and to change the schedule.
Make a motion to alter our budget workshop on August 18th from 5 p.m. to 1 p.m.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilmember Willis and a second by Councilmember Shoryak. Any other discussion on the item? Seeing none, City Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem Jackson.
4.
Councilmember King.
4.
Mayor Morrison.
4.
Councilmember Shoryak.
4.
And Councilmember Willis.
4.
Let the record show the time was changed as stated in the motion. Now let's go back up. We've got this, what we're voting on tonight is due on August 4th. We don't have any other meetings tonight. So that pressure to get it done emphasized, right? Would we want to have another out? And maybe we can decide that later in the meeting if we're not getting the progress we need. And that one, to Councilmember Shoryak's, potentially could be in the evening. Monday the 3rd in the evening, is that at least a time? And if we get through it tonight, we don't have to have that meeting or that discussion, but what are our thoughts on that?
Mayor,
Yes.
I think it's difficult without having discussed all of the items that we've been provided by staff to go in and make a determination on setting that millage rate. I think we also need to talk about how long of a recovery plan we want to take a look at and how that will impact the city. Without discussing that, it's hard to discuss the percentage of, the millage rate percentage unless we just choose to go with the highest amount and modify that later. But that's, I hate doing that way because citizens that are not keeping up with what we're doing or our meetings today could cause some concerns for them. So I think that discussing some of these details and determining what we want to do may benefit us. And
May I speak? Yeah. Though I agree in theory with what Mayor Pro Tem is saying, I think that the more people we can come to get out to these meetings, whether it's because they're irate about a paid parking, or whatever suggestion or whatever concern they have, is to all of our benefit. I want to see this room packed. I want to see the people here voicing their concerns and hearing our explanations as to why their concerns are either valid or not doable. That's how I see it. And the more available we make it to the people, as Councilman Shoryak says, and the more discussion that's emanating out there as a result of this, I think is to our benefit. And I think that by voting on the high end of the millage, that doesn't lock us in. That just gets people's attention. And they'll come out and they'll give us I want to see more than 4 people in here. And I think that that's what's going to do it. We've got to get their attention. We've got to, so that we can explain to them, just as our city manager has done this morning, what we are up against, what we are dealing with, and the input that we invite from them to help us resolve this problem. That's my 2 cents.
And I think that, yes, public input is going to only help our confidence. So I agree with everything.
And our transparency.
Yes, and I think time of day has an impact on that. But I think what Mayor Pro Tem's totally separate point is we're in this every year. We're trying to set a budget rate based on a budget that we're not comfortable with. And I know that the out, I guess, is, well, this is just a proposed rate. You can always go lower. I think in response to getting the residents' attention, I have full confidence that we could fill the room without, unless this council believes, sending a really high millage rate out, because that's a room that if we did not want, I think there will be no problem making sure, and I will help, and I know if we all help, we can have this room full. I know that. I believe that. And I don't want to, I agree with you, if that was printed and went out, I care more about just having as much information as we can to set it at the rate that we feel good about. And I guess tonight, we are trying to make that decision, which will roll into it being, I assume, electronically submitted on the 4th. And my thought would be 5 p.m. We don't have any input, or we don't have the input we want prior to doing that. So if it's due on the 4th, is it even possible if we voted on it in the evening of the 3rd, would that be enough time to submit the DR 420?
Oh, I was going to suggest you can certainly talk about it this evening, and you can table a decision since you want to do another workshop. You're talking about the 3rd, but you already have the 4th as a place marker date already. As long as it gets into where it needs to go by 5 p.m. on the 4th. I know it would be a daytime meeting on the 4th. If you want to do an evening meeting on the 3rd, and then you determine what it is then Joey can get it by the deadline the next day. But I don't want you to feel pressured that tonight is the millage rate, since you have a lot to discuss. It's on the agenda because it's the regularly scheduled meeting in advance of the due date. But you can have any other meetings in between tonight and then and do it then. And it'll free up some time on your agenda this evening too, because you have a lot of items to discuss.
I think if we bring it out to the attention to Councilmember King's point and we let them know this is the number that we came to, it will absolutely get their attention, and it would give us time for residents to give us immediate feedback. We come in much more informed, and I think we would have an excellent turnout on the 3rd. So Councilmember King?
Yeah, I just wanted to give us enough latitude to be able to, I mean, I'm not recommending that we go all the way to the top with this millage, but I don't want us to set a millage rate that then we don't have any maneuverability if it turns out that the budget is bumping up against that millage rate that we have voluntarily set as a limit. At least that's my understanding. City Manager, am I correct in that assumption that whatever we decide on a millage, at least not solid millage, but something to discuss, under which we have that latitude, is that out of line?
Well, no. I mean, you're duty bound to set a tentative millage rate, and it always wakes the community up because the notice goes out.
Right.
And then you have discussions from there. To the mayor's question earlier, you know, if you decide you want to go higher, then that could cost the city money to re-advertise. My guidance to you was, we know high doesn't look good when the notice goes out to the public, but you have a lot of unanswered questions, and I feel that you must start high if you're going to set tonight, because again, we have to first deal with the ordinance compliance, number one, and then number two, you haven't had any conversation about fund restoration plans and how many years that you want to restore the fund. And the millage you set now will automatically put a chunk of money into the bank to start year one of fund reserve balance. And that's why your millage that you set now is critical, not to mention the fact that we still have a $4 million deficit. So you need time to talk about what your fund restoration balance should be. And if you're going to decide tonight, then that number definitely needs to be at least 8 point, well, yeah, it has to be high. It just does.
Thank you for clarifying. That
Yes.
was my point. Thank you.
Yep, I think the story could go like this. We all heard about it today at 1 p.m., not ideal. Here's the rate, 10. It's nothing mailed to their homes, but we want to hear from you on this date because it's, you know, we need to vote and we can educate the public on, hey, this is a proposed rate. Well, there'll be potentially another workshop, more two public hearings, and I think it can really help. The question is could we've heard that even if we met on the 4th, city staff would have enough time, but it's due by 5 p.m., so I think that would conflict, which is why I think the 3rd is potentially a good date, or, you know, the more time to get the word out and also get feedback, the better. I guess if that's not a good date or even reasonable, that Friday prior, which is the 31st of July. And I think tonight we can continue to talk about it. I mean, it's on the agenda. We can at least take advantage of this time together and work through it. But what are your thoughts on having that as a standalone meeting with the goal of having the public be a part of it prior to submitting?
Mr. Mayor,
Anyone, open question? Yes.
I think
Councilmember Willis.
August 3rd at 6 p.m. would be beneficial time.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
It'll be do or die time.
I think that date works well. I'm not sure I agree with setting a proposed millage tonight. Okay. I do agree that we need to do it during that meeting. It's already being publicized out in the real estate world and all of that we're going with the 10% millage rate, like it's already decided because it was on our agenda. And that gives a false impression to our public. So for me, I think that setting the rate tonight is premature. I know that in the past budgets, we've gone through and set what objectives we want to see as far as how we're going to handle, and this is an extraordinary circumstance. So we really have to identify how long of a recovery period do we want. If we want to recover in 1 year, then stay at that 10%, and the citizens may like that. And you know what? I'm fine with that if they're fine with it. And that would be the fastest recovery we would have. But some of them may not be fine with it. So I think the 6 p.m. on the 3rd is very important because we have to get the feedback.
Agreed. And any other, do we want to make, are there any other comments before maybe making a motion here on 6 p.m. August 3rd proposed standalone evening? Should it be a workshop if we'd be voting city attorney? Would that need to be a special meeting?
Special meeting.
Okay, so if we do want to do this, I think we'll want to make the motion properly stating a special meeting at that date and time.
I'll make a motion that we have a special meeting at 6 p.m. on August 3rd to further the budget discussions and make a decision on the proposed millage rate.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Jackson, a second by Council Member Shoryak. That was August 3rd, 6 p.m.
Okay.
And it's really the title of this agenda item, right? So it's all properly.
May I say something, Mayor?
Yes, any discussion, Councilmember King?
Yeah,
On the motion.
I like the first part of it, but to set the millage rate on that date, I think we're really pushing ourselves against the wall. I think that if we can do something tonight that gives us the flexibility that we need to, it doesn't have to be 10%. It doesn't have to be 10. It can be 8, it can be 7. Whatever it is that we decide on, it gives us some wiggle room. We're really pushing it to go to that late date. The night before it's due to the county appraiser. I would rather have the like I said earlier, the latitude to the room to be able to discuss it and get feedback from the people, and with no assurance that it's going to be an 8% millage increase. Why aren't we giving ourselves that latitude to discuss it instead of pushing it out? You know what's going to happen. We're going to be here on the 3rd. And it's going to go right up to the wire. When I said do or die, that's what I meant. It's going to go right up to the wire. And do we want to pressure ourselves that way? I mean, we have a full budget book here with all kinds of information that staff has put together. I know I've not been through this before, but just common sense dictates that let's give ourselves some room to think. I think the city manager's suggestion is valid and is sensible. And I have to say that if I have to vote on a motion that sets that millage rate date when we talk about it the night before we send it to the county property appraiser, I'm going to vote against it. In all good conscience. But maybe I'll vote it too, so that's okay as well. I'll live with that as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Willis.
wouldn't we be discussing it still tonight anyway?
We absolutely can. In fact, a motion could be made tonight to adopt it. I think what I agree with Mayor Pro Tem and the motion on the floor, if you will, was that this would give another opportunity and to the concern on pushing it up against the wall. If it's due by 5 p.m. on the 4th, out of all the things in financial reporting, this one isn't one of the more difficult ones. I don't want to undermine. It's a one-page type.
Yeah, it's just submitting a document
Number.
with a number. Yeah.
Okay. So my understanding was it wasn't, staff would have adequate time if we finished that. Even if it was a late meeting, ended at 10 p.m., they'd have the entire next day, I think, to electronically submit. But we are saying, I think, yes to tonight, but also giving ourselves another opportunity, which I'd like to get more public comment prior. So that is correct. I think the council could make a motion. I wouldn't, unless we're getting a very different spot from that conversation, I wouldn't feel good about it at this point. But the motion's on the floor to schedule a meeting, whether it's needed or not. Then I think that was the...
Well, my point is that we can discuss it
Absolutely.
and bring up a lot of different ideas on.
We're not
thinking on it.
postponing.
No.
We're adding another meeting. Are there any other discussion on the motion to schedule a special meeting on August 3rd at 6 p.m.?
Mr. Mayor, let me rephrase my motion so that we don't have any confusion, if that's okay.
I think if you maybe just want to
Amend
don't
it.
rescind
it.
yet, let us know what you want to change, and then we'll see if it's needed. To not
Okay.
get
I
tangled.
had worded it to select a proposed millage rate,
Mhm.
and we can just take that out.
I
you know.
see. That's a good point.
Because we don't have to have that in there. As Councilmember Willis said, we're going to discuss this tonight. We found out last year that we didn't have to set it, at this high rate that we had done before, because we can modify it. So it's not the end of discussions, but maybe we need to rephrase that motion to say, I propose we have a meeting on Monday, August 3rd at 6 p.m. for feedback for residents and any pending decisions regarding the ad valorem tax rate.
Before seconding or formally getting ourselves tangled up here, City Attorney, I think if you've heard what we're trying to do here, it's Mayor Pro Tem. Do you have any recommendations? We've established it needs to be a special meeting as far as the title of the meeting and what it pertains to. How important is that?
If you're going to change, if there's a possibility that the city council would adopt a proposed millage rate in on August 3rd, then it needs to stay a special meeting. If the council were to, say, adopt the proposed millage rate this evening, then there would, it's hypothetical, then, the August 3rd meeting could be a workshop, but
then if we decided after going through the details of the budget that staff's provided to us to change that millage rate, it would have to be a special meeting on the 3rd anyway, correct?
May I jump in here? I'm not suggesting we set a millage rate tonight at all. And if that was what the impression I was giving, that's not what I intended. Well, all I'm saying is that following the suggestion of our city manager that we set a millage, a potential ceiling, so that it gives us the latitude to determine what the millage rate is going to be as we move forward through these budget deliberations. That's all I'm saying. Put a ceiling on it so that we can't, if we put a low ceiling on it, or if we don't put a ceiling on it at all, we're all over the place. I would just as soon know that, okay, we can tell the people, we're not going to go above 8.9, or we're not going to go above this, based on the city manager and staff's recommendations at this point. At least it gives us a little bit of room to breathe.
So that's helpful clarification. I think what you're talking about is your view on what we would set, and what we're saying is coming to that what, yes, would give us room. Right. But we wanted to have another date, because making that decision tonight without more public input, and while we could and have the latitude and maybe some of the benefits is higher turnout, the idea is to continue with the agenda item tonight, and in the event when we go into it tonight, we know we have another date if needed. And so the motion, I think Mayor Pro Tem's trying to get.
I'll just rescind my motion and y'all figure out what we need to do.
Well, I think the motion that you said was a special meeting, the original one. It was at 6 p.m. It was on August 3rd. And,
it would finalize any proposed millage rate. So I don't know why we're going here, but I can resend it and somebody else can reword it.
Mr. Mayor,
No, I'm trying to help.
I
Yes.
understand.
I think we may still get a full house tonight. Because it's already out there that we're considering.
So
Oh, yeah.
if we want, for the sake of time, we're in a workshop here to know that we have at least established that that time and date works. If we want, we can move forward, and then in the meeting tonight during the public hearing, we won't have to go back through this. If we feel like we're not ready to go,
Right.
we can make,
Okay.
I think, the correct
That's good.
motion at that time.
Except for that, we're in a workshop now, so can we make this motion in the first place?
Yeah, in terms of scheduling a meeting,
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
have any issues with the council
Okay,
having a vote on scheduling.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, or if we want to just go ahead and schedule it now, we can be done with that, and then at the end of the meeting, we can't strike, vote to. So there is a motion on the floor for that date and time to discuss that. Well, we've had our discussion. Council, do we want to move forward with a roll call? Or
Yes.
And then we can obviously cancel it if we want.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Any further discussion? Any clarity on the motion, City Clerk's office? Are we
Could you
good?
clarify it, please?
Yes. The motion was for August 3rd at 6 p.m.
Right.
To
Have a special meeting?
Special budget meeting?
a special meeting.
Right. On the,
August 3rd, 6 p.m. special meeting to, trying to find the exact agenda item we have here. We're going to have an additional meeting to discuss whatever the title and name is of that, which is
okay,
Resolution 20, item 9.7.
okay.
And we are maintaining in the discussion. We are going to keep it here tonight. We just wanted to at least have another date if needed. And if we actually do adopt it tonight, we'll obviously not have any reason to go for that special meeting.
Thank you.
So I don't want to try to word it when I don't think it's necessary. It's already written out here.
That's okay.
But Mayor Pro Tem did say the tentative proposed millage rate. Is that good?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Jackson.
4.
Councilmember King.
4.
Mayor Morrison.
4.
Councilmember Shoryak.
4.
And Councilmember Willis.
4.
Okay, thank you, council. We've got that. I think that definitely changes the, I think we're going to pursue it with the best of intentions tonight. We're not striking, and let's see where it goes. And having that, I think, is going to help us. So we have now established, we extended the existing date on the August 18th, and we've also now added a standalone day earlier on Monday, August 3rd, and I think that is excellent. We don't need to keep adding dates. We can kind of chart our course from there as we work through it. And so with that, thank you. Something else that I think is said, and just checking in, we're at 3:43 p.m. We've talked a lot about the code, and I think we'll get into it tonight. We want to take this meeting up and at least get an understanding. Councilmember King has shared kind of her thoughts on the latitude with the millage rate. I think we've heard about, so many unknowns with the budget. City manager, what do you need us to maybe get a little bit further down the road on in the big discussion of the budget?
So I think it's one of two things, or both, depending on how you proceed. I really feel that tonight's conversation that you're going to have is important to start now.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very full agenda, and you have important issues on that agenda that are going to require your attention. the people that they impact. The staff will be here for you to answer those questions. So the important issues ahead of you are the ordinance. We can focus on that here tonight or this afternoon so you understand that and discuss not only in whatever word you choose on the ordinance says that you're supposed to restore your reserve fund balance to 20% within 2 years. That 2-year clock from your staff's perspective began February of 25. So we are very close to the end of that 2-year period, and there is no fund restoration plan in place. So you understand that if you don't want to have a high millage rate for next fiscal year, then you're going to want to discuss either suspend that caveat of that ordinance, or however you want to phrase that, to where you are not obligated to comply with the 2-year window. Mm-hmm. And we can look at revising that ordinance in the future. We don't have to have a time limit. I don't know what past councils were thinking when they put in a 2-year window there. So we can amend that ordinance later, but you can discuss now what you want to do, decide, if you get a consensus or how you want to proceed on how you're going to determine it later. Are you going to suspend that, or are you going to stick to it? Mm-hmm. If they can deliberate that. And then that way you'll know when you get to it, well, we've already kind of got a consensus, we're going to suspend it, and then you can start talking about your fund restoration. And we can have fund restoration conversation now, if you like. We have the millage rates tentative on the chart. We have what would look like if Amendment 3 passes versus not. And you can start conceptualizing, if you will, what a fund restoration plan would look and feel like from a millage perspective for 2 years, at the 4-year or 6-year. And you can even talk about, well, what would it like if we did a 1-year, or a 3-year or 5-year, do the odd numbers, and we can calculate those things for you. I don't know if Joey can do it on the fly, or we can come back at a future workshop to do that. But I think make use of time now so you don't have to spend so much time this evening.
That's great. Thank you for refreshing. So the city manager's referring, we are in workshop now, but we'll be taking up the first item for discussion is 10.1, titled Fund Balance Policy Ordinance 18-2012 discussion. And so can we make a little headway in this meeting? Council, do you want to briefly talk about that?
I have,
Councilmember Willis?
Yes.
I have a question for the city manager.
Please.
Fund restoration PowerPoint. Yes, sir.
In your when you notified the state,
Yes.
what was your impression of how they would feel about us moving in maybe a 2-year period to restore?
They gave no real, they didn't weigh in on a time limit. They basically said that you have to have a plan, you have to determine what your plan is, and you have to stick to that plan. And they mentioned cities that formulated a plan and didn't stick to their plan, and how they are with the state now. We have to show progress, and the state is understanding when it comes to setbacks beyond the city's control. Mm-hmm. As long as we account for, if there is a setback, we account for that, and every year when it comes to the budget, we revisit our restoration plan when it comes to the millage, and that will determine, that will gauge when we'll restore it. So if that answers your question.
Yes, I'm just more or less
What I'm talking about.
thinking of if we took 2 years to restore,
Right.
how would that be received?
That would be well received. I mean, that we would get out of their hair and out of their radar. I prefer not to have state oversight in our business, and so that would get us off their books.
Trying to balance, if you will, between getting the state off our back or out of our hair.
Yes.
What little some of us have left, but also the impact on our citizens.
Yes.
So just to reach that equilibrium, if you will.
Yeah, they don't impose a time limit for you to restore. They impose a plan. You have to have a plan, and you have to stick to your plan, and you have to report your progress.
Well, historically, we've been third lowest millage, and to suddenly go the other way,
Mm-hmm.
significantly. I think we're showing that we're willing to bite the bullet, if you will.
Absolutely.
That's all up.
When I hit, there's no issues with the state other than there's a plan. Which is a great question. I think our own policy from the 2012 ordinance that we'll get to in tonight when we discuss talks about upon noticing 2-210, it says that unassigned fund balance, the city manager, right here, if after the annual audit, so the annual audit, as the presentation showed, happened this February, right? Prior committed or assigned fund balance causes the unassigned fund balance to fall below 17%. We learned that happened. Of the general fund operating expenditures, the city manager will so advise city council in order for necessary action to be taken. We've been advised. And I think we're deciding what that necessary action is to restore the restoration plan. We are in August, and he is looking for our direction on what that plan would be. My thought would be, and it says, the city shall take action necessary to restore the unassigned fund balance to acceptable levels within 2 years. Assuming acceptable levels is what the code says. I think we all agree with that. As far as saying we're 18 months in and we have 5 months to go, the thought I had was, the intent of that was, well, we have 2 years that it's happened. Should have been last February on the
About
25th.
4 months to fill that
One
window.
way to look at it is we have 4 to 5 months. The other way to look at it is, well, we just found out. And at minimum, I think, knowing the state, this is our code, once it's done in 2 years, and it's 2 years worth. So it's almost like, well, do we have 4 years to restore, or 2 years of, for whatever reason? My thought would be, instead of, suspending or striking, just an idea is that we would essentially start the clock, I think, the earliest I would go would be February of this year, because that's when I think it was really brought to our attention, and then go 2 years from that at an absolute minimum, which would be February of 28.
Yes, so to your...
And the plan could state this, or 4 years or 6 years, and I think I'd be more comfortable with changing the years. But, going in and changing the code, I really don't want to do that. It requires 2 readings, potentially. Should we just have a plan that honors and respects the code, acknowledging, here's the plan, here's when we found out about it, because it says, once noticed. And to me, we could have a plan that we adopt that I think aligns with the spirit of this. Those are my thoughts on it, and I think if we had that plan completed in the next, I don't know, when would be a realistic time to have a plan complete? By the end of we would approve the budget with the plan simultaneously? Is that what we're thinking?
We would.
Okay. So September, we'd kind of work parallel with it. The plan would be going along with the budget as we're talking through numbers. We'd adopt the budget, and this budget has an accompanying plan to get us restored to acceptable levels. Trying to establish a deadline for ourselves.
Right. So if we can go back to some of the things you're saying, if you're starting the 2-year clock now, then and you're going to maintain that provision of the ordinance, because I'm not proposing rewriting any ordinance at this moment. I'm proposing that, and the attorney can give the language, but you look at the existing language. If, let's say, you don't want a 2-year plan, whether you're going to backdate the 2 years to February 25, or you're going to start the 2-year clock now, let's say you don't want a 2-year plan, then in your deliberations, you'll still be in a position where you're going to have to adjust the 2-year requirement, and that's why I've used the word suspend that provision. As you well know, councils pass your rules that you follow and your codes, and you can amend them as necessary. And again, temporarily suspend it is the term I come up with. Whatever language works for the council, it's something that you have to vote on. But regardless of when you start your clock, if you're not satisfied with a 2-year plan, then you're going to have to address that provision of the ordinance.
Okay. And I know some of this is interpretation. The other way to look at it would be if we adopt the budget September, right? That's the last day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's 2 years would be technically September of 28. So the 28, I guess, or, you know, because it's not specific, within 2 years of what? Of notice of when it happened, of after the audit, after the plan is adopted. And so the other thought that came to mind is after the plan's adopted, that plan starts on a date and you got 2 years to restore it. Because it's vague, I think the more conservative would say February, and I think that makes sense. I'm going to ask a tough question. I think, what happens if we because this is our code, what would happen if we do not follow it? We get past even the most stringent 2 year, just say in 4 years, or 4 months, I'm sorry, and it's viewed that, no, that was when the 2 year time clock started. I guess, what are some of the legal risks with that, City Attorney?
Well, there's no penalty specifically provided in the section. So it's really an internal financial policy of the city. So, you know, there are no penalties specifically enumerated in the code. You know, so it is a policy. So I would look at it like as a policy, and you know, what happens if you don't follow a policy, right? Certainly one, you could be criticized for not following your own policy. Two, people could say that that the city's not conducting business in accordance with its own responsibilities that it established for itself, but there's no specific penalties outlined in here. And if I could, I agree. This section is subject to interpretation. There's kind of different ways you can read and look at it. But if the council wanted to clarify in an abundance of caution this provision of the code, then you would need to provide a little bit more clarity on when the time period actually starts and how long. There may not be a specific hard and fast time period to come into compliance. It may just be in accordance with the plan approved by the city council, right? If the code read that way, then it would be up to the council under whatever circumstances are presented to adopt the plan accordingly, rather than hold yourself to a specific time period. I mean,
I would feel comfortable with, when we adopt the budget this year, it comes with an accompanying plan, and the time frame in there, I think, should respect a 2 year period. In fairness to ourselves, if we're in violation of past the 2 years, well, that hasn't happened yet. If a miracle was pulled off, we were able to do it. But what has happened is it's fell below the threshold. So we are already in violation. And the fact that upon notice, which I think we all read that, we've got the plan coming in, we're in compliance with that. We did not receive a plan historically, so that's a second violation. So I think from the time we've noticed in our city administration staff in response, we can put a plan together that is adopted, and it actually doesn't even say that. I think I appreciate, that the council, well, maybe, yeah, it does. We approve the plan and we set the time limit to 2 years. Because I think that was the intent, is to not go longer than 2 years. but to backdate it or to do it from actually when it happened, despite none of us knowing, I don't think that was ever the intent, in fairness to us.
And if go ahead.
I was going to say, I generally agree with that. I think maybe one additional word would have clarified. I mean, the way it's presented, the manager has to prepare and submit a plan, right? Submit it to whom? Submit it to the city council. What are some of the options? They're all budget and appropriation options, right? To bring the fund balance back to its, established level.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last sentence says, the city shall take action necessary to restore the unassigned fund balance to acceptable levels within 2 years. Had that just said the city council shall take action necessary, it would have been more clear that that 2 years starts after the plan is presented by the city manager, considered by the city council, and then the council takes action to restore within 2 years is one reasonable reading. And I think that's what you're alluding to, is
Yep.
like the budget this year will kind of start the clock because the council's going to be presented with a plan. The manager's already put the wheels in motion, and through this meeting and through all the materials that you've been provided to lay out all the facts so you can finalize a plan.
A point of clarification? Does that imply that the reserves need to be restored within that 2 years? Or that a plan has to be in place that indicates that it will be restored, and then the council determines within 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 years? Where are we with that? I'm confused.
I can give you my view, and finance, feel free to chime in, but the code says take action necessary to restore the unassigned fund balance to acceptable levels within 2 years.
So that would force a millage rate if we decided to do that.
Well,
Wouldn't
you'd have to bring the possibly. I mean, the code contemplates reduction in expenditures, increased revenues in a variety of fashions. Those are types of steps that you can do to help restore. I just want to point out too that the code that we're talking about talks about unassigned fund balance, which is a defined term. When the city adopted Ordinance 18-2012, it was for purposes of implementing the GASB 54 rules, right? So that created those rules, and I'm not an accountant, and I don't want to pretend to be one, but establish a whole new reclassification of how you describe accounts, right? So this section is talking about restoring the unassigned fund balance, and that's a term of art, right, Joey, under Gatsby and under the code, and that's a 210 issue, not a 208.
We'll both use the unassigned fund terms, but they just compare it to a different denominator. One compares it to the adopted budget, and one compares it to the operating expenditures.
Well, I would suggest to you that 210 does not use, I don't think uses the term unassigned fund balance. So, but I digress.
Well, it does in that last paragraph, like you said a minute ago, to restore the unassigned fund balance to acceptable levels.
No, I'm talking about, I may have misspoke. 208 does not talk about unassigned fund balance. It talks about a reservation of fund balance.
So which one do we want to adhere to? We have a plethora of ordinances, it seems.
If I may, so the 2-year ordinance is what we have to, 208 is what you need to get to the 16.7. If you achieve 16.7, which would be at our estimated revenue, about 3.3 million.
Right.
You have to do that. If you achieve that, you will achieve 210 because that is a lesser amount. But if I could go back to the mayor's point and something Anthony went over is in 210 subparagraph E, it talks about the general fund, and it says if after the annual audit, prior committed or assigned fund balance causes the unassigned fund balance to fall below 17% of general fund operating expenditures, the city manager will so advise city council in order for the necessary action to restore it to 20%. So we are after that audit. We're several months after that audit, but we're after that audit. I presented it in a manner that you should have been told February of 2025, but that was after that annual audit, not this annual audit. It was not my duty or responsibility. I wasn't here. It was the duty to notify you after that annual audit. So I think because you've had an annual audit since then, you are bound to that annual audit, which starts your 2-year clock. That's my
In
perspective.
February of this year.
Of 25.
Of 25, okay.
Yes.
Now,
So-
I've got, go on.
I'm sorry, so we're well into that window now. Okay, so within that window, are we supposed to resolve the problem by making sure we have restored the amount that we're talking about? Or can we lengthen that? That's just the window to say, we've got a plan, we're gonna do something about it.
Yeah.
Or do we have to resolve it within that window as well?
So if you take that interpretation, but we are still after that audit, the prior leadership did not notify you. So technically, I'm notifying you after that audit.
Right.
And if you want to interpret it as you've been so notified, and we are presenting plans now as a part of your current budget process,
Right.
then you can stay within the ordinance that says 2 years.
Okay.
And your 2-year clock would start now.
Okay.
If you want to restore the fund balance within 2 years, that's where you'll have to have a conversation about the ordinance itself. If you want to follow the ordinance, then we have the millage rates that you will need
Right.
for that. One of those, so this year would be, we would say, is your first year of your 2-year. And then the next year millage rate would be, may or may not be impacted by Amendment 3. And we have those numbers. If you choose to stick with the ordinance and have a 2-year fund restoration plan.
Which would drive the millage rate skyward.
Well, so remember, it's like the attorney said, we have a combination of reducing expenses, increasing revenue, and revenue is not just property tax, but to your point, it is 40% of our revenue stream. So yes, it will involve, could likely involve a millage increase
Okay,
if you cannot reduce expenses.
okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, in the presentation that our finance director gave us on the millage rate scenarios, I wanted to get a clarification on Code 2208, because it says 16.7% unassigned of adopted budget, and GFOA says 16.7% assigned plus unassigned with an asterisk. So what are we doing here as far as the numbers there?
So we'll get that other PowerPoint up for you. And this is a point that was brought to the council's attention during the last audit. The GFOA, our requirements are more stringent than the GFOA. The GFOA is saying you're combining your assigned and unassigned, and you have to have a 16.7% minimum of assigned and unassigned.
Okay.
Our 16.7 is for unassigned only. And so if we were to combine the two, then we're basing it on a higher number.
Right.
If we go with unassigned, then we're basing it on a lower number.
Okay.
And that was a discrepancy in each audit, because that's where you bring in your cash forward. Your cash forward was being counted as assigned and unassigned, but we were spending it forward.
So as we just had the discussion about what we might want to look at as far as the time period for us to restore that, we're looking strictly at unassigned. We're not having to look at unassigned and assigned. And if we were to do it within our own code, we could determine, do we rip the Band-Aid off for the first year and have it done? I mean, seriously? Or do we go a more conservative route and give ourselves more time, overtime, and that can even be in excess of 2 years?
So to your point, there is a slide on the screen that would show a tentative millage rate for a 2-year restoration plan, annual reserve contribution of 1.6, but again, additional revenue is needed because we have a $4 million deficit that we need to address. But
Yeah, and I think it's really important because those questions, I just want to go in to answer that. I think it's really important. I am looking at the actual, I think it's clearly, we may not be able to say we all agree or anyone reasonably would agree on the interpretation, but we can agree on some clear items from the section 210E, minimum level of assigned fund balance that we've been working through to answer the question, Member Tim, on 2 years and some of the things Councilmember King. There's like 4 major events that I'm bringing out of this, and our city attorney, I think, was talking about he can help me get on track. But the first thing is the annual audit. Well, that happened, right? Undeniable. We all agree. We know who did that. And then it says the threshold. We've done the measurements. We've done that. Then it tells us who. It doesn't say city council. It says the city manager will advise. And so it's after the audit. It doesn't say before anything. It's after the audit. When were we notified? So it's really after 2 audits we were first notified. We can't control that. That's where we are. It's been after 2 audits. We were notified. I think we can say, as a council together in the public eye, that happened today. And the statement was read into the record. I think that's, yes. And I think that that's the cleanest and most transparent way, because we all now can understand it. And we've been presented with records. We, in full transparency, obviously, some signals were given to us. Looking back, we can see some information from the audit. But today, we are notified. So the city manager, has officially, informally, and publicly, where we're all in the same room, noticed us today. We all agree it should have been at that February meeting, but it did not happen. So today we've been noticed, and it is after the audit. Then it says he will advise the city council. He's done that. That's us. If he advised you individually, that wasn't the council. He advised us together in a meeting. So I think when I'm reading every word of that, those people and entities have been in compliance. I don't think any of us likes it because we want it to be sooner than it did, but it is after. And the city manager will so advise the council in order for the necessary action to be taken to restore the unassigned fund balance 20%. So that isn't giving a plan. He's just, we've seen today, this is, if you want to do it aggressively, to your point, one way to do it is increase taxes to this rate and you can restore it. But it further defines in the next sentence what exactly the city manager is to do. And it says the city manager will prepare and submit a plan. That has not happened yet. He has advised us today. The advice has happened. And it says, to answer some of the other questions, committed and or assigned fund balance reduction, as city manager and city attorney said, they tell us how to do it. Expenditure reduction is the first thing that the plan should include. So the what, who, city manager, what is a plan, expenditure reduction is one, and or, as we've discussed, revenue increases. We've seen some of those scenarios. And then a whole new sentence. The city shall take action necessary to restore the unassigned fund balance and to acceptable levels. And then it tells us how long we have within 2 years. That 2-year clock, in my opinion, cannot happen. This is sequential until after a plan has been submitted. Today we've been advised the plan needs to be submitted. I think it needs to be timely before maybe the next workshop, and then we need to take action, which I think would require adopting the plan and 2 years would start, in my opinion, after we adopt the plan. That's one interpretation, or I could certainly understand to go, no, it needs to be in 2 years, despite when you were advised, despite when the audit came out, despite when it happened. I think we should reasonably, because it's 2 years of misses, that at minimum, we would give ourselves 2 years to restore the first one. Here's another interpretation. It went down in 2024 a certain amount. So we give ourselves 2 years for that, and then you could argue you stagger it, and then you got another 2 years to do it. I'm not going to get wrapped around the axle on that part of it, but I just want to really emphasize that I do not think, I can see how that when we read this in sequential order, why we would not start the clock. We've been advised today, we can acknowledge that. We need to now receive a plan. The city manager is trying to get, and our finance director, what the plan would include. I think it should have expenditure reductions. I think it should have revenue proposals. We need to adopt that as timely as possible, and that plan needs to be to respect the 2-year time limit.
Yep.
So if we adopted it in, it's August here shortly. If we adopted it August and September, then it would be August or September of 2028, which is just before that year's budget.
So Mayor, if I can I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, this is why I was trying to, I got wrapped around the being able to communicate at that moment. But this is why I'm trying to get to, we haven't even looked at the details of the budget. And clearly, everything has said you have to look at expense reductions. There's new legislation before we can even give an increase of a certain percentage. There's new state legislation that says we have to go through a budget cutting exercise. We haven't done these things,
Right.
And we're looking at setting the millage rate proposed when we haven't gotten those steps finalized either. So this is why earlier I was saying we need to do that after we do some of these things, because we haven't gotten the process with our own ordinance done, and we also have new legislation at the state level that requires it if we're going to go up. So the next step, instead of selecting, a millage rate at this point, we've got to go through these expenses. We've got to have the hard discussions, and we have to do that based around what time frame we're looking at and whether we're going to go by the code or suspend it. And I agree with you that if we were just now noticed, then we should go from this point for the period of 2 years, because
It doesn't put a time limit. It just says after on this, the city
Right.
manager. I'm not disagreeing. I think,
All right. Well, it speaks to a specific audit is the point of contention. It speaks to the audit that was conducted on the fiscal 24 budget that was presented to the council February of 25. If after the audit, the fund balance went below 20%, and it did, then council shall be notified and the manager shall implement a plan that will be accomplished within 2 years. So, literally interpreted, it was that audit, but you're not getting noticed until now.
Correct.
And so either way, you have a code interpretation, and you're going to make a decision on how you're going to move forward with your code. If you're going to go, it was February 25, the attorney can help with understanding how you can not have to comply with that provision and move forward with your conversations. If you are going to say no, 2-year clock starts now, and then you start deliberating on what's a 2-year restoration plan look like and what's that going to be from a millage standpoint, and you hear from the community what that would do, and you decide, well, we can't do it in 2 years. You've locked yourself into 2-year commitment by saying, no, the 2-year clock starts now. And so therefore, either way, you're in a position where you you have to deal with the 2-year thing. Suspend it and direct me. We'll provide a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year options. We'll provide that to you, or you get into the conversation and realize, well, we're locking ourselves in the 2 years, but now we've talked about it and what that would look like, and we don't know that we like that. So now you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to suspend your requirement then, you know. So I think ultimately, you know, we have the item on the agenda this evening to determine how you're going to proceed. Perhaps you just suspend compliance with the ordinance at all until it's revised and presented back. The attorney can weigh in on this. And then you take 2 years off the table, whether it started February of last year or you start it now. You just take 2 years off the table until you're able to discuss reasonably and with time what a restoration plan would look like. And then you vote on that.
I think I would rather, as I understood some of what happens, because it's our own, there is potential scrutiny. I would feel better, if we're going to suspend it later. Try to pursue complying. I would rather raise my hand and say we are out of, if that is we are recognized that we are out of compliance. Mm-hmm. Our intentions are to pursue 2 years. I do think because it was for 1 year's failures, it is interesting to go, should it be 4 years? Mm-hmm. You're going to try to tackle the 2025 or the 2024 year. That's what we're really talking about. Mm-hmm. In 2 years. It gives you 2 years, but we're dealing with 2 years of misses. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, and then put a plan, and if that plan can be interpreted to not follow the code, I don't mind taking that on. I think that what we're doing is the right thing, and
I would agree. And to your point,
today we checked the box of that first part that we were advised as a council, and that part that says the city shall take action. Mm-hmm. I think the clock should start right when step one is to accept the plan. Because if you put a plan forward and we don't like it's undeniable that we would have to accept the plan. That's the first action. Mm-hmm. Well, we have the authority to set the budget. A plan could only go as far as the council could. So,
understood. Well, and you've heard me say this before. These things have happened. We are out of compliance with our code. Yep. What matters now is what you do now that you found out about it. And I think you publicly deliberated this issue. The public can see it. And your actions now are, what are you doing once you found it out? And I think that demonstrates responsibility and, you know, being conscientious of the situation.
Rough estimate, what was the 2024? Was it 1.2 million roughly?
The estimate for what?
The total dollars
of unassigned reserves?
It was over the period of 2 years that took it. It went down to 10%, if I recall. The auditors, yes, the unassigned reserved in the 24.
I can look it up.
Roughly, because this raises an interesting issue. It's a moving number. 20% of $1 million is $200,000. Mm-hmm. So what are you actually restoring? And I think, well, no, you're restoring the percentage. Mm-hmm. That's silly. I get it. So the percentage, whatever it is, which is another when you reduce expenditures, you're 20%, you don't need that same amount of dollars. You don't need as much pressure. City Attorney, are you, I think, wanting to weigh in on if it starts action, if we acknowledge that we received it today, we publicly deliberated it, we adopt a plan and we start that clock in 2 years, or we say we want 4 years to what I was going to say was the first 2 years would be to restore the 2024 amount, and then the next 2 years would be to restore the 2025 amount. However, that's a little tricky. Or 10% in 2 years and 10% next.
Well, I just want to talk generally about, I think what you're alluding to, Mayor, about the importance of the council establishing and adopting a plan. You know, once the council adopts that plan, we can cross the bridge on the 2 years, whether, you know, the plan is going to be a 2-year plan or whether or not you didn't meet the 2 year. That's irrelevant. What's important at this point is the adoption of a plan to restore unassigned fund balance. And the manager is correct in that when it was first noted in the audit 2 years ago, that triggered that time period for the city to take action and the manager to duly advise the city council. Unfortunately, that did not occur. But what's important now is what I think you're alluding to, is plan first, and then we'll deal with any, if there's a conflict or inconsistency with the plan and the code time period. That's the first point. The other point I want to address is this plan has to restore unassigned fund balance, and I think the council needs to be clear on what that unassigned fund balance target is in terms of a number. And as you alluded to, Mayor, when you reduce operating expenditures, the section 210 is 17% of operating expenditures, right? So the lower the expenditures, right, the lower the unassigned fund balance has to be from a mathematical standpoint. Lastly, in order to determine the target, not so sure the target, even though it's a code provision, is 208 of the code. When you look at what's in the agenda package from the audit, Joey, what was the auditor talking about when the auditing comment was made? Because the auditor was talking about not complying with the target at that time the audit was taken. And I think what the auditor was alluding to was not complying with the target in section 210 of the city code, which is 20% of total operating expenditures. Right? And that number is, I think from your presentation, Joey, I'm not sure, I think 210 is 2.76 million is what the city's trying to restore.
The number related to the 210 is the other number, not the 3.3.
Right.
And this is
2.76 million.
This is the most recent audit that's in the backup. Yep.
Yes, and I'm currently looking for the auditor's comment.
In the well-prepared agenda item, I mean, you provided that as backup.
It's highlighted in yellow. What's
yeah,
the
it's
page?
highlighted in yellow. I don't know what, like 108?
Well, it's 108 of the auditor's report.
And while he's looking for that, I just think it's important that if the council's, when it goes through this budget process, is to identify what that target is to restore unassigned fund balance.
That's different from what.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, what audit are we looking at?
Yeah, but it's a repeat of the same.
Yeah.
It's all about unassigned. That's not even correct.
This.
24. Yeah, and that's the year prior.
This is what you're looking at here.
Talks about minimum 20% of total.
Right, that's why I'm asking, because they.
Well, if I think of the audit, yeah, it's not in the. I would, my comment on the 16.7, I'm not sure I know that aligns with that section of the code.
Does not.
But we have 16 I thought that was the same number we used, but I'm not saying that he's necessarily talking about our code. He could be referring to the GFOA.
So 16.7 is a GFOA recommendation.
Right.
Correct, and it's what the council reduced it to last year during the budget process.
It could be
from
coincidentally.
20%.
Coincidental, I'm not saying, because he doesn't cite that section of our code. He says, or your internal code actually does. Okay. Well,
so
do we want to establish a plan? Is that what we're saying?
Well, so I have a question. yeah, I have a question for you. So if you're going to stick with the 2 years beginning now, then can you tentatively adopt the 2-year restoration plan this evening to be in compliance with the code as you're presenting it? And then subject to the budget workshops that we have, and once you get into the restoration side of it and how much we're able to reduce expenses and how we can increase revenues, and then come back and revisit the 2-year plan at that point and say, we prefer a 3 or we prefer something different because of what the millage rate is looking like. And that's a question for the attorney. Can we adopt a tentative fund restoration plan now at 2 years so you're in keeping with the code as you're interpreting it this evening? The clock starts now.
I was a little bit looser. I think that we've been advised now, we're going to give you feedback, and then we would adopt the plan in the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
And inside that plan, we would give ourselves, I think it only makes sense to respect, it would be at the end of a fiscal year, 2 years from, so we adopt it by the end of this budget to be 2 years.
Beginning October 1st.
28.
Well, that would be the end of it, correct?
That's what I'm leaning towards. I think.
Okay.
And so, city attorney, as far as a plan, you were saying that what's important, and we can go back and, if we want to make that longer or whatnot, but establishing that we want a plan is the priority, and acknowledging that I think we all wish we could give more feedback on what goes into the plan. I think these votes, we will have some time tonight during the discussion to actually get into which will be good because that'll be public. Well, I think we should do this and that and use some of those ideas. But if we've got, just say that next August workshop, before the budget, we adopt a plan, or it's hard to approve a plan without coming to agreement on the budget. It's like,
yes.
So can we do those
That's
coterminous together or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't need to adopt a plan. Our task this year is two things.
Right.
We need to adopt a budget, and unlike most councils, unfortunately, we need to adopt a restoration plan and we could literally, I assume, incorporate it as a part of the budget. I mean, that's really transparent to
Yes.
go, we acknowledge in here management's notes that this, please see the attached plan.
And that'll be the driver.
Okay.
That'll be the driver.
And if there's any scrutiny on that, well, we'll just have to face that. And I think the best of intentions here. So is that?
That's clear guidance. You need a framework to structure your conversations, and that framework is 2 years.
We don't need any motion here, I don't think. We're just in the workshop, but maybe if we want the discussion to give clear direction, we could choose to do that.
You just have to think about how you're going to approach this on the agenda tonight, because we had the millage item as well as the ordinance item. Previous guidance was to switch those two on the agenda. You can approach that tonight at 6.
Do you think we still should move it up, 9.6?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a couple of items in there that we can put off to another month. You can substitute, and then there's another one that you might just want to move to the consent agenda, and that's the handbook.
Yep.
If you all, I'm not making you vote now, but if you get consensus to just put that under consent, we'll be done with the handbook and maybe move the ordinance item down to that number. And that will precede then the millage conversation.
That's great. We'll do that at the beginning. If the council chooses approval as agenda as written. I hope we get into that, we take that item up and we start giving input on what we believe the millage should be. And then when we get into the fund restoration, I hope that we talk through like the actual nuts and bolts of what we believe after we've learned this is there. And that would give city staff, a lot more clarity between now and our next meeting, and maybe a very rough draft plan can start coming forward. I think it would just accompany the budget. it'd be kind of in the back of the budget, and we would approve it all together.
So then we'll have a figure to work with.
Yeah,
I mean, right now, it's kind of pie in the sky, where it's ephemeral, I guess is the word. This will give us something tangible. At least
Yeah.
for me.
the budget we passed needs to meet this plan that we want to do as we're, okay. And it would be good to change that code sometime in the future, but not while we're under it. I don't feel it's good because it is not clear. Okay, well, we're at 4:34. What do we want to do? I could use a quick break, or we want to adjourn. We've had enough. City man, anyone opposed to adjourning?
Good breaking point.
For the evening?
Yeah.
That gives us an hour and 25 minutes to get ready.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
City attorney, anything? No, sir. Okay. Well, with that, we'll go ahead